The Jacobson family seemed to have it all: wealth, success, and a beautiful home in Wellington, Florida. They appeared to be the ideal loving family. However, appearances can be misleading. Behind the facade of their perfect life lay a much darker reality. What was meant to be a joyful birthday celebration for their two young boys turned into a devastating event, leading to a tragedy so profound that the entire nation would remember their names. To fully grasp this story, we need to go back to 1989 when Neil Jacobson met Frankie at a gym in Bayside, Queens, New York, where they both lived and worked. They are ambitious and successful in their careers. Frankie was making her mark at Lehman Brothers, a leading firm in finance, while Neil had established his own boutique firm on Long Island. They were young, driven, and aspiring to achieve the American dream. Those who knew them praised their relationship as one filled with deep admiration and affection. Frankie was entirely devoted to Neil. In turn, he was seen as a charismatic and kind man with immense potential. Within his family and social circles, he was often regarded as a golden boy, intelligent, charming, and seemingly unstoppable. Together, Neil and Frankie appeared to be the perfect couple. They soon took the next step in their relationship by getting married and moving into Neil's home in New Jersey. Transitioning into married life was easy for them. Together, they created a comfortable, rewarding life filled with shared interests and adventures. They did everything, enjoying activities like biking, scuba diving, and weekend trips to the countryside, which helped strengthen their bond. To an outside observer, their life seemed perfect. However, amidst their seemingly ideal marriage, they felt something was missing: children. They desperately wanted to start a family, but the path to parenthood was challenging. For years, they endured the painful reality of infertility, going through multiple fertility treatments that brought both hope and disappointment. Despite the emotional toll, they remained determined. Finally, in 2003, after many struggles, their dreams came true when they welcomed twin boys, Joshua and Eric. With their lives already comfortable, Frankie and Neil experienced happiness beyond what they had ever imagined. Their family felt complete, and they thrived both personally and professionally. Neil's parents, Harold and Goldie Jacobson, moved from New Jersey to Florida in 2000. Although they loved their new home, they missed being close to their son and his family. They often expressed their frustration about the distance and wished for more time with their grandchildren. In 2005, Harold was diagnosed with cancer, and his health deteriorated rapidly, making it impossible for him to travel to New Jersey. This situation was a turning point for Neil. Being far from his father during such a critical time was too much to bear. He decided to move his family to Florida to be closer to his parents. Before the move, Neil had already started investing in real estate in Florida. He bought a pre-construction condo in Lantana and then a second one shortly after. Real estate quickly became an obsession for him, leading to the purchase of a third condo. Despite recognizing that he was stretching himself financially, he was drawn in by the booming market. Frankie, however, was concerned about his investments and questioned their practicality. Nonetheless, Neil was resolute in his decision and was not willing to change his plans. With his properties piling up in Florida, Neil began pushing Frankie to relocate. She was resistant, hesitant to leave behind the life they had built in New Jersey. She loved their home, their community, and the stability they had created. But as time passed, the financial strain of maintaining their New Jersey home became overwhelming. Eventually, Frankie reluctantly agreed to the move. The Jacobsons officially settled in Florida, eager to start a new chapter close to family. However, things did not go as planned. Neil had hoped to sell their New Jersey home before the move, but the market wasn't in his favor. Just 2 months after they arrived in Florida, tragedy struck. Harold Jacobson passed away. The loss of his father devastated Neil in ways he hadn't expected. He had uprooted his entire life to be closer to Harold, only to lose him so soon after arriving. The grief weighed heavily on him, and his mother, Goldie, later revealed that Neil had struggled with his mental health from a young age. She recalled that as a teenager, he had been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, an issue that had plagued him for years. Doctors had noted that Neil had an overwhelming desire to be the perfect child, a pressure that followed him into adulthood. As the years passed, his struggles with anxiety only grew, and soon, things took an even darker turn. The Great Recession hit Florida hard, and Neil, who worked as a mortgage broker. The real estate market collapsed, and the once thriving business that had allowed him to invest so freely was now crumbling beneath him. The financial security he had worked so hard to build was slipping away. As the weight of his losses grew heavier, so did the cracks in his once stable world. The Florida condos he had invested in before relocating were quickly turning into a financial nightmare. Burdened with subprime mortgages, their payments increased month after month, stretching his resources thin. At first, Neil had convinced himself that things would turn around. He had always been a problem solver, always finding ways to make things work. But this time, no amount of determination could keep the walls from closing in. With little to no work coming in, and 4 separate mortgages draining their finances. At first, Neil and Frankie tried to hold on, dipping into their savings to stay afloat. But as time passed, their financial situation only worsened. Bills piled up, debt collectors began calling, and the stress of trying to keep everything together was pushing Neil to his limits. Desperate for a solution, he started making risky financial decisions, one bad choice after another, each one digging them deeper into a hole. He chased after risky investments, sought out loans, all in a futile attempt to stop the inevitable collapse. Eventually, the weight of it all became too much to bear. The financial juggling act had run its course. Frankie was exhausted and drained, made the painful decision to stop paying the mortgages on their 3 Florida condos. It was a move that felt like surrender, but they had no choice. There was simply no more money left to give. By the year 2008, the pressure of Neil's business failures had begun to take a serious toll on his health. At first, it started with minor complaints, aches and pains that he couldn't quite explain, but as time went on, his symptoms worsened. He became sluggish, struggling to muster the energy for even the most basic tasks. His body felt heavy, and his mind clouded. He experienced random bouts of dizziness that left him feeling unstable, and he found himself unable to focus the way he used to. Concerned, he visited the family doctor, who ordered a blood test. In October, the results were troubling. Neil had elevated hormone levels, but there was no immediate explanation for his decline. As the weeks passed, his condition only worsened. The once energetic and determined man was now lethargic, withdrawn, barely functioning. He was eventually diagnosed with depression and transient peripheral vertigo, a condition that further contributed to his constant dizziness. In an attempt to help him cope, his doctor prescribed Zoloft, a common antidepressant. Neil, desperate to feel better, took the medication as prescribed, hoping it would offer some relief. But instead of improving, his mental state deteriorated further. A few days after starting Zoloft, he was called back to the doctor's office, where they added a prescription for Xanax. It was meant to ease his anxiety, but his family and friends quickly noticed that something wasn't right. Instead of stabilizing his mood, the medication seemed to send him spiraling even further into darkness. His paranoia intensified, his emotions became more erratic, and Neil they had once known began to fade before their eyes. Neil's sister, Deborah, became deeply concerned about her brother's rapid decline. She confided in their mother, worried about what he was going through. According to Deborah, Neil had started experiencing terrifying hallucinations. He had grown increasingly paranoid, convinced that someone or something was out to get him. Frankie, his wife, was just as alarmed. She desperate for support as Neil's behavior became more and more disturbing. He had completely withdrawn from the world, he refused to go outside, stopped engaging with friends and family, and even neglected his own hygiene. There were days when he wouldn't even shower, lost in a haze of fear and depression. His paranoia took a terrifying turn when he became obsessed with the idea that the FBI was watching him. He was convinced that federal agents were surveilling him, gathering evidence to have him arrested. He would talk about it constantly, warning anyone who would listen that they were building a case against him. His delusions became more elaborate. He was certain that his phone was tapped, that his home was under surveillance, and that at any moment, the authorities would storm in, take him away. His mother saw the full extent of his paranoia. One of the last times she visited him, Neil pulled her aside, his voice shaking with fear. He told her he was in big trouble, insisting that the FBI was coming for him, that he had done something terrible, though he couldn't seem to explain exactly what. The fear in his eyes was real, raw, and overwhelming. As Neil's mind unraveled, January 23, 2010. The darkness he had been wrestling with for months finally took over, and what happened next would shock everyone who had ever known him. That morning, Neil stood before his wardrobe, fumbling with the top shelf, his hands shaking as he retrieved a loaded gun. His wife, Frankie, still groggy from sleep, watched in confusion, not yet realizing the horror that was unfolding before her. Neil, with the gun in hand, stepped out of the wardrobe, his face hardening into something almost unrecognizable. Frankie's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit her. In an instant, panic took over. She leapt toward him, struggling desperately to wrest the weapon from his grasp. They tumbled to the floor, the fight becoming a chaotic blur of screams, desperation, and tears. In the midst of the struggle, Neil, in a violent frenzy, struck Frankie, knocking out her front tooth and slicing her finger. Despite the brutality of it all, Frankie didn't give up. She fought with all her strength, but Neil was too much, overpowering her in his disturbed state. With cold detachment, he stood, reloaded the gun, and turned the weapon on her. 2 shots rang out one after another, each striking her in the face, silencing her forever. But Neil's twisted path didn't end there, covered in Frankie's blood. He reloaded the gun and made his way to his son Eric's room. Eric, who had been lying on his stomach in peaceful sleep, was the next victim in the nightmare that Neil had somehow constructed in his mind. 2 bullets tore through Eric's body, but against all odds, the boy survived the first 2 shots. However, Neil was undeterred, his mind fixated on finishing what he had started. He grabbed a pillow and pressed it over Eric's face, ensuring his son wouldn't survive. 2 more shots, and Eric was gone. The house was eerily still now as Neil moved toward the next room, where his youngest son Joshua was sleeping. Joshua, blissfully unaware of the carnage around him, lay curled in his sheets. Neil's actions were methodical, almost as if he were following a script. He covered his son's face with a pillow, silencing him with 2 shots to the face. In a matter of moments, the vibrant lives of his family had been extinguished, with the blood of his wife and children staining his hands. Neil walked to the bathroom and turned on the shower. He stood under the water, numb, as if washing away the sins he could no longer escape. When the shower ended, he dressed, swallowed a cocktail of Vicodin and Xanax, in a haze, left his home. As he drove, the pills began to take effect, making him groggy and disoriented. Less than a mile from his mother's house, Neil passed out behind the wheel, swerving off the road and coming to a stop in the grass. Neil had initially planned to kill his mother, next before taking his own life. But in his twisted state, something inside him held him back. He later told the police that when he was at home, standing in the living room, he thought about going to heaven to be with his father, but he couldn't leave his mother alone, so he planned to take her with him. Thankfully, he never made it to her house. When the police found him, Neil was disoriented, barely conscious, and gripping the gun beside him. As they approached, he muttered, "I killed my family," in a dazed and broken voice. The investigation raised many questions. Was Neil a victim of the side effects of his medications, or had he planned this horrific act all along? A suicide note found later suggested that Neil may have been preparing for this moment, leaving many to wonder whether he was driven by his medications or if he had, at some point, simply snapped. His attorney's defense centered around his mental state. They argued that he had been suffering from severe depression, anxiety, and paranoia, all of which had been worsened by the medications he was taking. They described Neil overwhelmed by financial ruin, haunted by the fear that the FBI was watching him, and convinced that there was no way out. His legal team insisted that he had not acted out of hatred or rage but had instead been driven to an unimaginable breaking point due to the side effects of his prescription drugs. To support their argument, the defense brought in medical experts who testified about the dangers of Zoloft and Xanax, the 2 medications Neil had been prescribed before the murders. These drugs, they explained, could cause extreme mood swings, hallucinations, and suicidal tendencies, especially when taken together in high doses. Neil's behavior before the killings, his paranoia, delusions, and refusal to leave the house, was presented as clear evidence that he had lost his grip on reality. His lawyers pushed the narrative that Neil had been a loving father and husband, a man who had never shown any signs of violence before, making it hard to believe that he had killed his family intentionally. But the prosecution had a different story to tell. They painted Neil not as a victim of medication but as a desperate man who had methodically planned the murders. They argued that his financial troubles had reached a boiling point, and that instead of facing them, he had chosen to take his family's lives in an act of ultimate control. They pointed to the way he had executed the killings, retrieving his gun, reloading it multiple times, and ensuring that no one survived. To them, this was not the act of a man lost in a haze of confusion but one who had made a deliberate and calculated decision. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence against Neil was the suicide note found in his home. The note indicated that he had thought through his actions and accepted what he was about to do. It wasn't the frantic scribblings of someone in the middle of a psychotic episode, it was organized, reflective in the prosecution's view, proof of premeditation. If he had truly been unaware of his actions, why would he have left behind such a message? The prosecution also called witnesses to testify about Neil's behavior leading up to the murders. His sister, Deborah, had noticed a dramatic shift in his personality. He had become increasingly paranoid. His wife, Frankie, had confided in Deborah that Neil was no longer the man she had married. He had stopped showering, refused to leave the house, and seemed trapped in his own mind. While the defense used these accounts to argue that Neil was suffering from a mental breakdown, the prosecution used them to show that there had been warning signs that should have led Neil to seek professional help instead of resorting to murder. Neil's mother, Goldie, also played a heartbreaking role in the trial. She had been one of the last people to see him before the tragedy. She recalled how Neil had told her, "Mom, I love you, no matter what happens." The courtroom fell silent. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, but in hindsight, it was clear he had been preparing for what he was about to do. Goldie, who had always seen her son as a kind and loving man. She struggled to reconcile the Neil she knew with the one on trial for murder. As the trial progressed, the jury was left to decide whether Neil Jacobson had truly been in a state of antidepressants-induced psychosis or if he had coldly and deliberately murdered his wife and children. The prosecution emphasized that Neil had made a series of conscious choices, loading his gun, aiming at his loved ones, and pulling the trigger multiple times. They argued that no matter what struggles he was facing, nothing justified what he had done. The defense, on the other hand, urged the jury to consider his mental state, to see him as a broken man who had been consumed by fear, paranoia, and desperation. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge, while acknowledging the tragedy of the situation, made it clear that no level of financial distress or mental illness excused the murder of innocent children and a devoted wife. Neil Jacobson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His fate was sealed, and the courtroom was filled with an overwhelming sense of loss. Neil Jacobson reached a plea deal with the state. He changed his plea from not guilty to guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder. He stated that the reason was the family's mounting financial situation. Now, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. Neil Jacobson answered to the judge in the Palm Beach County courtroom, admitting that he shot his wife, Frankie, and then shot their twin 7-year-old sons while they were asleep in their Wellington home back. During the family's turn to speak in court, Neil held his head down and never looked up. Even after the trial ended, many questions remained. Could this tragedy have been prevented if Neil had received different treatment? Were the medications to blame, or was he simply a man who refused to face his failures? No one could say for certain what had driven him to this point. However, what was undeniable was that a mother and 2 young boys had lost their lives in the most horrific way possible. Nothing could ever undo that. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send the sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed, it had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told Day that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told Day that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally, and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory MacDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michaela Costanzo. Michaela Constance was born on May 3, 1994, in the small town of West Endeavor, Elko County, Nevada, USA. She was the youngest daughter of Celia and Theodore. She has two sisters named Christina and Delicia. She is famous for her cheerful personality, and she also easily spreading joy to her family and friends. She has a unique perspective on life. She uses her sensitivity to see the good in people and situations. Michaela was very close to her sisters, and they looked so alike that it was sometimes hard to tell them apart. In high school, Michaela became well known and popular. Initially, she stood out for her excellent grades, and later for her impressive performances on the track and field team, which she practiced diligently. Her peers saw her as a star. She also loved writing poetry, with a passion for literature and a dream of becoming a writer. When given the opportunity to demonstrate her storytelling skills, she eagerly took on the job of editing the school newspaper. Christina, her sister, witnessed her success firsthand, as they went to school together every day. Michaela and her mother, Celia, have a strong relationship, largely due to their frequent and open communication. Celia worked the night shift at a local casino, and little girl kept her informed of all her activities through messages. This thing allowed Celia to feel at ease, help her know where Michaela is and who she is with. This time, Michaela was going to meet Cody Patton, an acquaintance from childhood. Although they had grown apart over the years, they were reconnecting. 19 years old, Cody was also in high school and was popular, mainly because he was an outstanding football player on the school's team. His 2-meter height intimidated his peers, and his personality drew mixed reactions. At times, Cody could be extremely nice, but he also had a quick temper and could become easily irritated. Mickey's mother, Celia, recognized this about him. She acknowledged that Cody was an interesting young man who be incredibly sweet and charming. However, he was also emotionally unstable, making it difficult for both his classmates and parents to accept him. This may be why he aimed to join the Marine Corps after high school. He hopes it will help him find direction and purpose in life. Toni Fratto, Cody's girlfriend, was a strong supporter of his future plans. At 19, she was a former high school beauty queen and was deeply religious. Toni's parents still approve of Toni and Cody's relationship, even though Cody is not religious. Over time, Cody and Toni grew closer, and she became fully devoted to him. They got engaged and held an official ceremony at church. However, Cody's impulsive and hot-tempered nature remained an issue. After a heated argument with his father, Cody asked Toni if he could stay with her family. Her parents, Casey and Claude, hesitated when Toni suggested this idea, creating family tension. Toni's love for Cody, a young man with problems, was already a concern. Toni's parents feared that refusing Cody's request might lead their daughter to run away with him. So, they agreed to let Cody move in. They hope this will help them take care of their daughter, while also helping Cody succeed in the future. Over time, Toni's relationship with Cody's parents improved, and they acknowledged that Cody was not a stranger to their family. However, Toni remained uneasy. Even though Cody has proven to her that he wants to be with her, but she felt uncertain about their relationship, especially during his interactions with Michaela. Toni kept a diary to express her fears. She fears that Cody will fall in love with Michaela, and that he might leave her for Michaela. This tormented Toni, and her suspicions were not unfounded. Cody was secretly seeing someone else, but it wasn't Michaela, it was an older woman from out of town. Instead of reassuring Toni, he took advantage of her jealousy for his own amusement. He provoking her by interacting with Michaela in the school hallways and sending explicit texts. Tony responded to these provocations by publicly insulting Michaela. Michaela started a relationship with Javier, a young man from school. She wasn't interested in Cody, neither romantically nor as a friend. Therefore, it was unpleasant for her to encounter Tony, who was jealous and often insulted her. The situation worsened as Tony's attacks became more frequent, and arguments between Tony and Cody increased. They discussed their issues in front of classmates. On Thursday, March 3, 2011, Michaela went to school as usual. Christina informed Michaela that she couldn't pick Michaela's up after her running practice because she had a race out of town. Meanwhile, Cody had borrowed a van from a woman he was seeing and exchanged several text messages with Michaela throughout the day. After track practice, around 5 p.m., Michaela decided to walk home since it was only 2 kilometers away. As Michaela was leaving through the back door of the school, she encountered Cody. He attacked her, tied her hands, and forced her into a van. He then picked up Tony. They drove to the outskirts of town, to a vast desert area known as the Gravel Pits, about 8 kilometers west of the Nevada-Utah border. Once there, Cody and Tony pulled the girl out of the van, began beating her, and insulted her with horrible words. After hitting her several times with a shovel, they inflicted knife wounds on her and watched her die. They then removed Michaela's clothes and burned them along with her other belongings. Using the same shovel, Cody dug a shallow grave, placed the body inside, covered it with soil, camouflaged it with vegetation, and then fled the scene with Tony. When Michaela didn't show up and didn't answer calls or texts, her mother, Celia, became worried. As it was getting dark, she decided to leave work early. Celia returns home to find that her 2 older daughters, Christina and Delicia, have been asking around to see if they know where Michaela is. However, no one knows where Michaela is. So, she went to the police to report her youngest daughter, Michaela, missing. The West Wendy police immediately launched an investigation, led by experienced detective Donald Beckham. When they asked Celia if she had been in contact with Michaela in the past few hours, she replied no. The next morning, the police interviewed Michaela's classmates and friends, including Cody. Cody declared that the last time he saw her was with her boyfriend in front of the school gate. However, this contradicted the accounts of other witnesses. They said they saw Michaela at the back of the building after school. Meanwhile, at home, Celia is extremely scared and uncertainty. Delicia called and texted Michaela several times, hoping for a response. When they discovered Michaela hadn't come home the night before, Christina had dismissed it as teenage rebellion, but now she has changed her mind. Meanwhile, search parties scoured the desert around the city, while the police focused on questioning people close to Michaela, including her boyfriend Javier. He mentioned that Michaela was not someone who would hide things or act strangely. After 2 days of searching, investigators found several unusual things in the desert. They found fresh tire tracks, leading to a spot with fresh blood stains. There was also a suspicious-looking mound of dirt, covered in bushes. Detectives alerted forensic experts, and they quickly arrived at the scene. Upon excavation, they found Michaela's body, showing signs of beatings on her face and neck. A tie was also found in her hand. The police then reviewed the school CCTV footage for more evidence. As soon as Michaela's family was informed that her body had been found, Delicia broke down completely. Delicia felt as if a part of her had been taken away. She couldn't work or focus on anything, because she kept thinking about her younger sister's image, Michaela. Investigators have begun looking into Michaela's phone activity and her social connections. They discovered that at the time Michaela went missing, she had been calling and texting Cody, making him a suspect in the case. Further evidence came from school surveillance footage, which showed she and Cody together in the hallway leading to the exit. A few minutes later, she was gone. On the evening of March 6, Cody arrived at the police station for questioning, accompanied by his father, Keith. During the interrogation, officers showed him video footage from the school's surveillance cameras, but he insisted he was not involved in the incident. Meanwhile, lawyers and investigators gave Cody time to review the case materials and allowed him to speak privately with Keith. Worried, Keith urged his son to tell the detectives everything. Keith begs him to understand the severity of his actions. Now, he must make amends by answering to Michaela's family. He accepted the possible consequences and expressed his readiness to face them. He also told his story of the incidents that took place that day. Cody recounted that after school, he and Michaela went for a walk to the gravel quarry. While there, she asked him to break off his engagement to Tommy and start dating her instead. When he refused, they had a heated argument. He claimed that Michaela hit him in the chest, and in self-defense, he pushed her away. Unfortunately, she hit her head on the car's rear bumper and began to convulse due to the strong impact. Panicking, he tried to knock her out by hitting her head with a shovel, but she stayed conscious. He then cut her throat. Once he realized Michaela was dead, he buried her. When questioned by the police, he said he thought about taking her body to a dump, but couldn't bring himself to do it. When asked about the zip ties on her wrists, he explained they were part of a plan to dispose of the body. After burying her, he sat there crying for several hours before going to find Tony. Despite his detailed account, Cody was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, possibly facing a death sentence. In this situation, Cody's family hired John Hudson, a well-known defense attorney. He specializes in helping murderers not receive the death penalty. Michaela's family didn't just feel the pain of losing their daughter, but were also in disbelief that Cody had so brutally killed his childhood friend. Christina was especially shocked and believed that if he was truly guilty, someone must have forced him to do it. On the other hand, from the start, Celia never believed his confession. She doesn't believe that Michaela considers Cody a friend, let alone ask him to be with Michaela's. Additionally, as a mother, she knew very well that Michaela hated scandals. When Cody was arrested, Tony wrote numerous letters to he, called him, and visited him whenever she could. She said she missed him so much and she would always support him. Meanwhile, the police tried to investigate further, hoping to find useful clues in their conversation. Tony's parents, Claude and Casey, were shocked by the incident and even asked Cody why he committed the crime. Cody simply replied that he didn't know why he did it. The lawyer pointed out that Cody's confession didn't explain all of Michaela's injuries, he suggesting that it was not an accident as Cody claimed. The injuries suggested they weren't caused solely by a shovel, implying that someone acted out of anger. To understand the situation better, the lawyer decided to question Tony. As the interrogation progressed, Tony appeared cold and indifferent. Her emotionless attitude is completely inappropriate, since she is Cody's wife, the man facing the death penalty in this case. In April 2011, just weeks after Michaela's death, Tony's parents left town, leaving her alone at home. That morning, Keith, Cody's father, arrived at her house and took her for a drive. During their conversation, he persuaded her to visit Cody's defense attorney and tell what happened. At the attorney's office, Tony agreed to let lawyer John document her account, which turned out to be completely different from what she had previously stated. Tony claims that after school, she received a text message from Cody, saying that he had kidnapped Michaela. The three of them then headed to the gravel pits. When Michaela and Cody got out of the car, they started arguing, but Tony said she couldn't see what happened. She only heard a noise that alarmed her, and she got out of the car to see what was going on. She saw Michaela lying on the ground and Cody digging what appeared to be a grave. When he stopped, Michaela was already unconscious. Then, they hit her several times with a shovel, and when she showed no signs of life, they took turns stabbing her. Tony also admitted to sitting on Michaela's feet to restrain her during her convulsions. The lawyer John, representing Cody and not Tony, quickly revealed Tony's confession to the police. Consequently, Tony, who was not initially a suspect, was arrested and charged with murder without bail. Forensic experts collected samples from Tony's home, car, and clothing to look for evidence that she was present at the murder scene. In mid-June 2011, the court decided that Tony should also stand trial for murder and kidnapping. The preliminary hearing was set for August 2nd, but in January 2012, Tony accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In his testimony, Tony said that Cody was angry with Michael from the beginning. When she entered the van, she noticed that Michaela was very scared. Michaela sat in the back with her hands raised to her face. As they drove into the desert, Cody asked her to help him kill Michaela. Then, Cody asks Tony to watch Michaela while he digs a hole. Once he was done, he forced she to hit Michaela. She refused, so Cody began to beat Michaela. The next, he made she strike Michaela with a shovel. The blow hit Michaela in the shoulder. She then sat on the ground, holding Michaela's legs, and he attempted to slit Michaela's throat with a knife. 3 months later, the district judge sentenced Tony Fratto to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The judge described it as the most brutal murder he had witnessed in his 20-year career. The motive for Michaela's murder remained unclear. On Wednesday, May 9, 2012, Cody appeared in court, pleading guilty to first-degree murder, also to avoid the death penalty. On Friday, August 24, in Elko Court, Cody Patton was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was imprisoned in Nevada State Prison. Later, in an interview with a well-known television company, Tony shared a more dramatic version of the tragic story. She revealed that Cody had been abusive and controlling of her throughout their time together. She admitted that because of the abuse, she was unable to fight back against him. Looking back, she believed she could have been his next victim. She also accused he of forcing her to participate in Michaela's murder. She said after witnessing him brutally beating Michaela, she feared for her life, leaving her with no choice but to comply. Michaela's mother, Celia, was unable to work for a long time and avoided going to restaurants where she had previously visited with Michaela. She feels sad about her increasingly distant relationship with her other daughter, Delisha. She explains that the tragedy of Michaela's murder changed Delisha so much that Delisha dropped out of school and left the city, estranged from her family. Everything at home reminded her of Michaela, which was overwhelming. The tragedy devastated 3 families: her family, Tony's family, and Cody's family. It will take Michaela's family and friends a long time to get over this loss. Cody will never see his family outside of prison again. Although Tony may be released from prison in the future, her father sadly says that when that happens, he may not be alive. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Molly Tibbetts. Molly Tibbetts was a vibrant young woman born in San Francisco on May 8, 1998, to Rob and Laura Tibbetts. She had 2 brothers, Jake and Scott. Molly was fortunate to grow up with loving parents and began to excel in school shortly after starting 2nd grade. Life presented Molly with an unexpected challenge. Things were going well for her and her parents until they decided to divorce. In 2007, Molly moved to Brooklyn, Iowa, with her mother and brother. Brooklyn was her mother's hometown, and Molly now had the opportunity to experience her teenage years in this quiet town. The move was difficult for Scott, Jake, and Molly, but their caring parents provided essential support. Their father, Rob, maintained a close relationship with his children. Although he couldn't be there all the time, he was determined to do everything he could to help them. Brooklyn is a small town with a population of only 1,400. Life there is calm, a stark contrast to the hustle and bustle of San Francisco. Molly and her two brothers have adapted perfectly to their new home. Molly plans to continue her studies at Brooklyn College. She is a sociable person who makes many friends. Molly is smart, energetic, positive, and cheerful. In 2015, Molly met a senior named Dalton Jack at her Brooklyn school, and she instantly liked him. This encounter took place on a chilly October evening while Dalton and his friend were sitting in a pickup truck after playing football. A few younger students approached them, including Molly. Dalton was immediately taken with her. She made him laugh and he found her beautiful. They exchanged phone numbers and soon began having lunch together and going to the movies. From that point on, they fell in love and Dalton considering her his everything. Molly and Dalton's love for each other deepened over time. 2 years later, when Molly moved from Brooklyn to study psychology at the University of Iowa, she maintained her relationship with Dalton. While she was in Iowa, Dalton stayed in Brooklyn to pursue a career in construction, but this did not affect his feelings for her. They managed to see each other almost every weekend and even on some weekdays. Her freshman year at university passed quickly. By the end of May 2018, she returned to Brooklyn for the summer. During her break at home, Molly kept herself busy throughout the day. She worked at a local children's day camp at Green Regional Medical Center, and in the evenings, she participated in activities to prepare for her sophomore year. Molly also made time to go jogging almost every evening. She split her time between her mother's house and her boyfriend Dalton's house on the western edge of Brooklyn. Unlike university students, Dalton didn't have a summer vacation and worked most weekdays. His construction work is sometimes local and sometimes he works across the state. On July 18, 2018, Molly visited Dalton's house. Dalton lived there with his brother and their dogs. But both of them worked away from home. Dalton was working on a project on Highway 61 near Oak. Molly agreed to take care of the dogs and stay at Dalton's house to work and study. It was a hot day, so Molly stayed inside with her dogs and her laptop, hoping for a cooler temperature. The day seemed normal. She spent her free time chatting with her boyfriend on the phone, looking for something to eat, or engaging in conversations on Twitter. As the sun set, the weather cooled down. This is a good time for Molly to go for a run. Around 7:30 p.m., she left her laptop open, sent Dalton a selfie, put on her workout clothes, and headed to the cornfield for her workout. However, Molly never returned. She was missing that night. Dalton, who had not heard from her that night, assumed she was just busy and had gone to bed. But the next morning, when Molly's messages remained unanswered, he began to worry. He contacted friends to ask if they had heard from Molly, but they had no idea where she was. All of her social media accounts are inactive. The panic really began when her boss called Dalton to find out why she had missed work. Molly was always on time for her job and had never missed a day before, so her absence was unusual. Dalton was worried and wondered what could have happened to her. Her silence made Dalton, her family, and friends feel uneasy. By the end of the day, the police and the local community were mobilized to search for Molly. Missing posters were quickly plastered around the city and surrounding areas. Shortly after, Molly's father Rob flew from California to join the search efforts. In mid-July, Iowa was experiencing hot summer days, and the surrounding cornfields made visibility difficult. Police announced on television that the search for Molly is ongoing. While there are no new updates, the search continues. Molly, a 20-year-old University of Iowa student, went missing last Wednesday in Brooklyn. She was last seen by her neighbor jogging with her dogs, wearing shorts, a sports bra and sneakers. At the time, Molly's whereabouts were unknown. The only confirmed sighting was when a neighbor saw her running east of town that evening. Police had no further leads. As the weeks passed, the reward for information about Molly had increased significantly, to nearly $400,000. They even created a website to encourage the public to share any information about Molly. Police also analyzed data from Molly's fitness tracker to determine her running route. Despite all the efforts, the investigation remained unsolved until mid-August. A person in northeast Brooklyn was reviewing surveillance footage when she noticed something unusual. Concerned, she reported her findings to the police, leading to a crucial discovery. The footage showed a 1951 Chevrolet with chrome side mirrors and handles. Initially, nothing unusual appeared, but the car returned and appeared on surveillance cameras multiple times. Then, at 8:07 p.m., the same Chevrolet was recorded again, this time speeding away. Based on the footage, the car, which was behaving erratically at the same time and place that Molly went missing, caught the attention of the police. They began searching for the car in the small town. They quickly located it. A day after reviewing the video of the black Chevrolet, deputy sheriffs spotted the vehicle on the road. Instead of stopping immediately, he followed the car until the driver stopped. The deputy sheriff approached the driver's window and identified him as John Bath. When asked about Molly's disappearance, John claimed he had no knowledge of her and was not involved. He was allowed to leave, but his freedom was short-lived. Just 2 days later, police officers visited John's workplace at a dairy farm and noticed he was now driving a different car, which belonged to his girlfriend. At this point, the police began to take notice of John, but they had no evidence that he was involved in Molly's disappearance. The police took John to the local police station for further questioning. Although John was not required to answer their questions, he chose to cooperate. The interrogation lasted several hours, and ultimately, John confessed. However, his real name was Christian Bahina Rivera, and he lived and worked in rural Polk County near Brooklyn. Originally from Mexico, he had entered the United States illegally at the age of 17. Because he could not work legally, he was not registered in any official system, including at his job on a farm near Brooklyn. During questioning, police asked Christian if he knew where Molly was, and he admitted that he had seen her the night she disappeared. He explained that he had noticed her before deciding to approach her. When he ran over to strike up a conversation, Molly did not respond. When he persisted, she took out her phone and warned him to leave or she would call the police. The next day, August 21st, after more than 10 hours of questioning, Christian agreed to lead the police to a remote area outside of Brooklyn. When the police arrived and got out of their car, they found Molly's body. She was lying under some corn stalks, wearing only a sports bra and socks. Christian confessed that when he confronted Molly and she threatened to call the police, he acted out of anger and ended up killing her, then hiding her body in a cornfield. Molly suffered between 7 and 12 stab wounds to the chest, ribs, neck, and skull, ultimately leading to her death. This tragic news has left Molly's family, friends, and acquaintances heartbroken. As they learned more about the circumstances of Molly's death, their grief turned to anger. On August 22nd, Christian was charged with first-degree murder. Concerns that he might flee led to his bail being raised from $1 million to $5 million. As the investigation into Molly's disappearance turns into a murder case, developments related to her case continue to surface both in public and in the media. The following month, Christian denied any involvement in the case, despite initially confessing to Molly's murder. He later recanted his confession. Police made significant progress in the case. They searched Christian's black Chevrolet and discovered blood in both the trunk and on the rims. Testing revealed that the blood belonged to Molly, indicating that she had been in Christian's trunk that night. A series of bureaucratic delays postponed the court case. The public trial of Christian was delayed for several months and moved to another county for safety reasons. In August 2019, Christian's defense team submitted a 20-page motion arguing that his confession should not be used as evidence. They claimed he was not properly informed of his Miranda rights because of his foreign nationality. This means that although he admitted to killing Molly, he did not receive a warning that anything he said could be used against him in court. Therefore, his confession could not be used as evidence. In addition, the judge postponed Christian's trial until 2020 to allow more time to review the case. In 2020, the trial was postponed again. On May 17, 2021, Christian Bahena Rivera's trial finally began. His defense team argued that the police had violated his rights before charging him with murder. They claimed that the police had used illegal interrogation methods to force Christian to confess. When this approach failed, the defense attempted to blame Molly's boyfriend, Dalton, claiming that he had cheated on her 3 years earlier and then killed her. However, Dalton had a solid alibi for the time of Molly's disappearance. Although he was absent from work for nearly 2 hours, several co-workers were able to confirm his whereabouts during that time, and it was clear that he loved Molly very much. Christian eventually testified, but he changed his story. He claimed that 2 armed men came to his house, forced him to drive them until they found Molly, then killed her and forced him to drive to a cornfield, threatening his son's life if he revealed what had happened. Christian's confession, the surveillance footage, Molly's blood found in the trunk of his car, and his own incredible story all pointed clearly to his guilt. On Friday, May 28, Christian Bahena Rivera was convicted of murdering Molly Tibbetts. After just 7 hours of jury deliberation, Christian was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. After the verdict, Christian's girlfriend, who had been raising their son Will, disappeared from Brooklyn, leaving his son on the farm without a family. With nowhere else to go, Will was eventually adopted by Molly's mother, Laura. This adoption allowed Will to continue his education and move toward a brighter future. Her parents consistently chose love over hate, which helps explain Molly's positive character. The support didn't end there. Hundreds of people came together at the University of Iowa to celebrate Molly's memory. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jeffrey Hazelwood. Natalie Henderson, Carter Davis, and Jeffrey Hazelwood are 3 residents of Roswell. Natalie and Carter are friendly, intelligent, and optimistic. Natalie is actively involved in school activities, often representing the school at social events, while Carter balances academics and sports. Jeffrey, on the other hand, struggles with his studies, with his grades and academic performance significantly lower than his peers. As a teenager, Jeffrey was sent to a military-style school, and after graduating, he remained unemployed for several years. He later found a job in government, which allowed him to support himself. Jeffrey had a challenging childhood. He was born on July 10, 1996, into difficult circumstances. His mother, Sherry, was only 19 years old when he was born, and Sherry's partner abandoned her before Jeffrey was born. During her pregnancy, Sherry struggled with drug use. Those around her realized that she was incapable of caring for a child. As a result, when Jeffrey was 6 months old, he moved in with his grandparents. Although Jeffrey's grandparents loved him, his troubled relationship with his mother leading to him being labeled a difficult child. Throughout his teenage years, there were many incidents reported in Jeffrey's family. Jeffrey frequently engaged in dangerous activities. On one occasion, he wrote a note saying he was going to spend a few days in the wilderness testing his survival skills. In another disturbing incident, he took his grandfather's gun, prompting neighbors to call the police. His actions increasingly worried his grandparents, who attempted to hide the weapons. Despite their efforts, Jeffrey, who was smart and determined, successfully broke into a safe and took the knives and swords he loved. By 2013, when Jeffrey turned 16, his grandmother felt the need to report his troubling behavior to the police, likely out of concern for her safety and that of others. Just weeks earlier, he had warned her that his patience would eventually wear thin, and he might hurt someone, although he didn't specify who or when. As a result, Jeffrey was sent to a military school. After returning, he entered a relationship that he cherished deeply. His social media accounts were filled with expressions of love for his girlfriend, mixed with images of wolves, dark quotes, and posts about anger and mortality. No one seemed to notice or help Jeffrey. Eventually, the city of Roswell had a serious problem. On August 1, 2016, a Monday morning, a driver was making a delivery at the local grocery store. At 6 a.m., just as he approached the store, his peaceful morning turned into a nightmare. As he turned the corner toward the delivery area, he was shocked to see two bodies lying side by side in a parking lot, both dead and covered in blood. Panicked, he called the police to report what he had seen. Police quickly arrived at the scene and discovered the bodies of two young people. A man and a woman, both dead. Police spotted two cars parked nearby, and when they ran the license plates, they discovered they belonged to Carter Davis and Natalie Henderson. The young couple came from middle-class families, and neither had a criminal record or any violations. The investigation began with a search of the vehicle and a review of surveillance camera footage from the supermarket. The video showed Carter and Natalie driving through the parking lot at approximately 3 a.m., before disappearing behind the building. Additionally, just minutes before they arrived, a silver Honda had parked in front of the store. After Carter and Natalie passed the Honda, a tall man with long, unkempt hair got out of the Honda and followed them on foot, but then disappeared from view of the surveillance camera. His facial features were unclear, and the video did not capture his license plate number. All police could determine was that the car was silver, a 1990 or 1998 model, and had mismatched wheels. Police contacted the Bureau of Investigation for assistance in finding a suspect. The task was difficult because they needed to compile a list of all Honda owners in the city. After sifting through the data, they narrowed the list down to about 650 vehicles and their owners. This process of elimination was long and difficult, requiring patience and effort on the part of the police. However, their persistence paid off. On August 3, 2016, just 2 days after the discovery of Carter and Natalie's bodies, police located a driver's license that belonged to a Honda owner. This owner, Jeffrey Hazelwood, 20, lived in Roswell and was known to police because of his long black hair. His grandparents were shocked when some police officers knocked on their front door. Their surprise quickly turned to concern when the officers asked about their grandson Jeffrey. They informed the police that they did not know where he was. Jeffrey's grandparents said that they had kicked him out of the house 2 days ago. The police then investigated and found that Jeffrey was staying at his girlfriend's house. They knew the address and set up a perimeter around the house. After finding the boy's car parked in the driveway, the police waited nearby, patiently waiting for Jeffrey to show up. Hours later, Jeffrey finally came out of the house, got into his car and drove away. Undercover police observed Jeffrey as he arrived at a gas station, walked around, and changed his clothes. At that point, officers surrounded him and arrested him on suspicion of the murders of Natalie Henderson and Carter Davis before he could react. Initially, Jeffrey denied killing anyone, but after being held for several days, he was questioned by Officer Jennifer Bennett, who was assigned to Jeffrey's case. During this interrogation, several strange details came to light. When arrested, Jeffrey insisted that he was an innocent bystander and that he had not killed anyone. However, during questioning, he claimed that another man had pressured him into committing the crime. As the interrogation continued, he stopped mentioning his accomplice. Additionally, Jeffrey claimed that a voice in his head had told him to kill Natalie and Carter. Despite Jeffrey's numerous lies and confusing statements, Police Officer Bennett was able to piece together what happened on the night of August 1st. Jeffrey said his troubles began when his grandparents kicked him out of the house. To clear his head, he went to a local Waffle House, but since he had nowhere to stay for the night, he decided to park at the local grocery store. He arrived around 3 a.m. and sat in his car. While he was sitting there, 2 cars pulled into the parking lot, drove past him, circled the building. Feeling bored and lonely, Jeffrey decided to follow them on foot. After the 2 cars parked side by side, Carter Davis got out of the car and got into the back seat of Natalie's car. Natalie then joined him in the back seat, saying they wanted some private time together. Unbeknownst to them, Jeffrey was hiding behind the nearby electrical panel, observing their interaction. However, Jeffrey climbed up a nearby service ladder to get a better view from the roof of the car. Jeffrey later claimed that he did not watch for long. Sadly, Jeffrey obtained his grandfather's gun after breaking into a safe just before being kicked out of his house. What he did next was horrific. He climbed down from the roof, approached Natalie's car, and demanded that Carter exit the vehicle. He struck Carter with the gun. In that moment of panic, Jeffrey realized Carter was taller and stronger, putting him at a disadvantage in a physical struggle. In a shocking act, he raised the gun and shot Carter in the head at close range, then ordered Natalie to get out of the car. Without detailing what he did to her, Jeffrey later shot Natalie in the back of the head after she turned away. After both victims were dead, he ransacked Natalie's car, took her wallet, and drove away. However, Jeffrey's criminal activities did not stop there. That night, he was found at a gas station using Natalie's credit card to fill up his car. Surveillance cameras even recorded Jeffrey wearing a mask to hide his identity. During questioning, he stated that despite having the mask and gun, he did not take any further action. Jeffrey stated that he needed the mask to hide his identity from the person who ordered him to kill Natalie and Carter. After stopping at the gas station, he returned to the bodies. He placed the bodies on the asphalt as they had been found that morning. He then called his girlfriend and asked if he could stay with her until he could sort out his family issues. She had no idea that he had just killed someone, and she welcomed him into her home. Eventually, the police tracked him down and arrested him. During the trial, his behavior was highly erratic. He talked to himself, claimed to hear voices, and even spoke with a British accent, at one point sat shaking, made erratic head movements, and talked to himself. He was also observed conversing with an imaginary dog and pretending to hit it on the head. At a later hearing, Officer Bennett shared Jeffrey's confession, revealing the disturbing details he described about that night. He said he pulled Natalie out of the car, forced her onto the hood, and then shot her in the head. The defense argued that Jeffrey exhibited symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, Asperger's syndrome, and dissociative identity disorder. While each of these conditions can be controlled individually, the combination of all 4 conditions makes him an extremely unstable person. However, none of these conditions had been formally diagnosed. As such, he was deemed competent to stand trial and, with appropriate treatment, could become stable enough to understand the proceedings. Given the overwhelming amount of evidence, including forensic material from surveillance camera footage and seized items, the proof against him was strong. The prosecution quickly built a strong case against Jeffrey. The initial trial was scheduled for September 9, 2016, but it was postponed multiple times because he needed treatment. He was moved to a secure psychiatric hospital to continue his care until a new trial date was established. A hearing was conducted to evaluate Jeffrey's competence, particularly his ability to understand the legal proceedings. While he occasionally rocked in his chair, psychologists could not pinpoint his specific mental disorders. However, they diagnosed him with psychosis, which is a disorder that causes a disconnection from reality rather than a mental illness itself. Finally, on May 17, 2017, Jeffrey appeared in court as he was nearing recovery. He was not allowed to speak during treatment, so his attorney spoke on his behalf. The judge offered him a plea deal regarding the murders of Carter and Natalie, which Jeffrey accepted. He was then sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring that Jeffrey would spend the rest of his life in prison or a mental hospital. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Anna Kriegel. Geraldine and Patrick Kriegel lived in Ireland. In 2006, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. The couple had a strong relationship and dreamed of having a child. They understood that adopting a child from an orphanage required significant time and effort, as well as meeting strict requirements, but they remained hopeful. Both had successful careers and were financially stable while waiting for their adoption documents to be processed. Eventually, they received news that a 2-year-old girl from Russia was available for adoption. Her name was Anastasia, born on February 18, 2004, in Novokuznetsk. After her birth, she was placed in an orphanage because her biological mother could not provide her with a good life. On August 10, 2006, the family brought the little girl home, marking the day as their family holiday. They decided to keep her name and called her Anna for short. The happy moment when they heard Anna's laughter filled the house. Anna was loved by her parents. They made efforts to make their family happier. They went ice skating and planned summer tourism trips. The family often went on vacation to Patrick's hometown of Annecy, France, where they owned the house. Anna made several friends there and she looked forward to this trip every year, as she loved France and was even learning French. However, Anna struggled with learning English, and Patrick supported her in this so she could communicate better with her peers. Anna also found it difficult to form close relationships and express her emotions. Her time in the orphanage, where Anna lacked care, made her uncomfortable with being touched. Nevertheless, Geraldine and Patrick helped fill this emotional gap by loving and supporting Anna unconditionally. Their nurturing environment, along with educational activities, healthy meals, and sports, provided a strong foundation for Anna's future. During a routine checkup, doctors discovered a tumor in Anna's right ear, which resulted in significant hearing loss in her right ear and partial blindness in her right eye. Despite these challenges, Anna remained an active and cheerful girl. However, her hearing and vision problems affected her ability to learn, causing her to struggle to retain information and resulting in poor grades in elementary school. To keep up with her classmates, Anna sought professional help until the end of 3rd grade. One day, while walking home and enjoying her favorite music through her headphones, Anna suddenly encountered 4 boys blocking her way. They mocked her and even pinched her, causing her to run home in tears and tell her mother everything. Worried, Geraldine and Patrick decided to take action and file a complaint against the boys. To keep Anna safe, her parents decide to take her to school and pick her up every day, but this makes her an easier target for teasing, much to the distress of Geraldine, who feels heartbroken over her daughter's misfortune. As time passed, Anna began to harm herself to cope with her emotional struggles. Her parents became increasingly alarmed, worried that she might take more drastic actions. Geraldine's only wish was for her daughter to find happiness. After a while, Anna started to improve. She made new friends, people she enjoyed sleeping over, going for walks, watching movies, and chatting with. As Anna's high school years were coming to an end, Geraldine wanted to help her prepare for her upcoming test on May 13, 2018. They usually spent the weekends doing homework together, and even though Geraldine was very busy, he always made time to study with Anna. However, this weekend, they decided to take a break. They turned on the TV, made popcorn, and cuddled up while watching a movie. Anna's cousins joined them, and Geraldine ordered pizza. The kids played games while the adults relaxed with wine and snacks. The house was filled with laughter and fun, and no one could have predicted what would happen next. On May 14, 2018, the day started like any other. Geraldine took the train to Dublin, while Anna went to school. After lunch, Anna had an appointment with a psychologist. Meanwhile, Patrick, who was already retired, decided to sleep in. Classes ended at 4 p.m., and Anna tried to call her mother, but Geraldine was in an important meeting and couldn't answer. She sent Anna a message saying she would call back later. When Anna gets home, she finds her father Patrick relaxing in the garden. Patrick is surprised to see Anna, coming home with a boy he has never seen before. Anna is clearly excited. She whispers something to the boy, grabs her favorite sweater, and tells her father she will be home soon. Patrick reminds her that she needs to study, which she has forgotten. Patrick watches as they leave for the park, and that is the last time he sees his daughter. At first, her father wasn't concerned because the park was only a 20-minute walk away. At 5:10 p.m., Geraldine returned home and attempted to call Anna, but she didn't pick up. After some time, she gave up on calling, assuming Anna would return soon. When Anna still hadn't come home, Patrick told his wife that Anna had gone to the park with a guy. This was unusual. Geraldine quickly sent Anna a text asking her to come home but got no reply. This silence worried her parents. Geraldine felt anxious due to past experiences where her daughter faced ridicule for her illnesses. Worried, Geraldine went to the park but couldn't find Anna. The parents began driving around the neighborhood searching for her. Their anxiety grew when they realized they knew nothing about the guy Anna had been with. By 9 p.m., they reported Anna missing to the police, stressing that she hadn't answered any calls or messages, which was very unlike her. They also informed the police about the unknown guy. The police quickly located a young man named Boy B, who appeared surprised by their inquiry. When they asked him where Anna was, he explained that they had walked together until 5:40 p.m. and then parted ways. Following this, the police initiated a search for Anna, scouring the area and examining surveillance footage. Patrick and Geraldine, Anna's parents, provided photos, including one of her wearing the black sweatshirt she had on when she left that evening. While the police analyzed video footage that showed Boy B and Anna in the park around 5 p.m., they noticed that at 5:14 p.m., the two left the park through a different exit, and after that, Anna seemed to have disappeared without a trace. The investigation was accelerated when a witness reported seeing the couple in the park. The video showed Boy B walking alone in the park at 5:49 p.m. When pressed by police, Boy B revealed that he had been with a friend named Boy A, who had feelings for Anna, and that he had facilitated their meeting. With this new lead, police stepped up their search efforts, sharing information about Anna's disappearance on social media and in local newspapers. At the same time, the search for Boy A started. His backpack was discovered, and security cameras captured him going in and out of the park, but there was a long period where he wasn't seen. Some people thought Anna might have run away, but that idea was quickly rejected. To solve the mystery of her disappearance, police carefully examined what happened in the park that day, looking closely at the actions of Boy B and Boy A with their parents present. The boys' interactions raised suspicions among the police, resulting in them being questioned separately. Boy B's testimony remained consistent, but Boy A's story differed. He was surprised when Boy B asked him to go with him, knowing that Anna had feelings for him. During their conversation, Boy A described a frightening incident in which two unknown men attacked them, leading to a struggle in which he injured one of the attackers. He showed police his injuries, including scratches and cuts to his face, suggesting that the unknown men might be involved in Anna's disappearance. As a result, the police asked for descriptions of the attackers and collected the boys' belongings for DNA testing. As the investigation continued, specialized search teams, including divers and rescue teams, were sent to examine local waters. A total of 60 people, including volunteers and Anna's family, assisted in the search for her. Her disappearance attracted significant media attention. Near the park, there was an old, abandoned farmhouse called Glenwood. An eyewitness saw some young people going inside, which led the police to investigate. The farmhouse was 2 stories high and covered 42 hectares of land, but it was in a state of disrepair, with many collapsed roofs and walls. It was puzzling why the police hadn't examined the place sooner. They began their search in the park and then moved towards the farmhouse, thoroughly checking both the house and the surrounding fields. Inside, the house was dark and empty. One of the officers was struck by a strong, foul odor that filled the room. The officers then discovered the body of a woman, surrounded by clothes and a broken phone. There were also traces of blood nearby, along with a brick and a large tree branch. Based on the clothing, it was determined that it was Anna's body. She had multiple wounds, and her neck was wrapped in duct tape. Her body lay among broken bottles and debris. The incident profoundly affected Geraldine and Patrick, as the loss of their beloved daughter was an unimaginable sorrow. The whole city was informed of the events, leaving many residents in shock. The farmhouse, which was once a safe place for children to play, had turned into the site of a terrible crime. On May 18, 2018, hundreds attended Anna Kriegel's funeral, wearing red and white armbands in her memory. The Eiffel Tower represented her love for her hometown, while her father honored her birthplace by wearing the Russian flag and carrying a doll. An autopsy revealed that Anna had suffered about a dozen injuries to her body, with numerous bruises and cuts concentrated on her head, face, and neck. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. An asphyxiation suggested she had been raped. Evidence of semen was found at the scene. Her death occurred between 5:25 and 5:54 p.m., shortly after she left the park. At the entrance to the building, she was beaten with a heavy stick and then hit with a brick, leaving blood splattered on the wall. On May 24, police gathered all the evidence and arrested 2 teenagers, Boy B and Boy A, who were last seen with Anna. The townspeople were shocked, as both were suspected of killing her. In Boy A's backpack, they found a zombie mask with traces of Anna's blood, along with gloves and knee pads. Semen found at the crime scene matched Boy A's DNA, and Anna's blood was also found on his shoes and clothes. Despite the evidence against Boy A, no DNA was linked to Boy B. During questioning, Boy B admitted that he saw Anna enter an abandoned house with Boy A but claimed that he did not know what Boy A was up to. Boy B wanted to enter the house but was frightened when he heard screaming coming from the entrance. He then sees Boy A tearing Anna's clothes, realizing the danger, but Boy B does not speak up, even though Anna's fate depends on his actions. Both boys were released on bail while awaiting their trial, which caused frustration among local residents. People became increasingly concerned for their safety, especially since the identities of the boys had not been made public. Both boys came from well-respected and successful families, and they had no previous criminal records or mental health issues, which surprised the community. Their case hearing took place on April 30, 2019. It was a closed hearing, with only the parents of the two teenagers in attendance. The prosecutor explained that Boy B deceived Anna into leaving her home by claiming she would meet Boy A, someone she was interested in. Instead, Boy B took her to an abandoned house where she was raped. The jury trial took place on June 12, 2019, and 5 days later, Boy A received a life sentence, with the option for a review after 12 years. Boy B was also convicted for Anna's death, despite insufficient physical evidence, and was sentenced to 15 years, eligible for review after 8 years. By law, their identities must remain confidential, and if released, they will be provided with new identities. However, Anna's parents endured the heaviest loss. Geraldine expressed that life without Anna lost its meaning. Patrick passed away on June 19, 2022, burdened with the guilt of allowing his daughter to go off with a stranger that day. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Marbella Valdez. One was born in Tijuana, Mexico's second-largest city, located in the state of Baja California. In 2020, when this case was being developed, one was 40 years old and owned a cleaning company. Although this was his main job, he seemed to have a true passion for the security sector. On one occasion, he interned at the forensic office of the state prosecutor's office. He is still passionate about being a law enforcement officer. Occasionally, he would even go out on the streets dressed in a police uniform. In August 2019, one met a 20-year-old girl named Marbella Valdez. She has a sweet and cheerful personality. She is often called Bella by her family and friends. As a child, she experienced many hardships. At the age of 5, she was sent to an orphanage. She continued to spend the following years in such facilities. According to local pastor David Lopez, who was present when the girl was admitted to the orphanage, she quickly demonstrated her kind nature and goodwill. This helped her win love and respect from the other children, as well as from the staff there. Although facing many difficulties, Marbella still feels optimistic and loves life. At the orphanage, she made friends like Brenda Valdez and Jairo Solana. Brenda became very close to her. Pastor David observed that they were often playing together and always by each other's side during various activities. They always love, help, and protect each other. Brenda took on the role of an older sister who was always there for her. Over time, Marbella started dreaming of a better future and successfully completed both primary and secondary school. She was considered a good student and actively participated in youth religious groups. She realized that progress comes from studying and working hard, so she started selling sweets to her schoolmates at the age of 16 and did extra work as a house cleaner. Fortunately, on her journey to success, Marbella had support. William Messick, an American IT executive, had been helping her and Brenda for some time. In 2014, he started a program to aid orphans from Tijuana, Mexico. His idea is to help children during the most difficult and vulnerable stages of their lives, until they are mature enough to face life on their own. Having been an orphan himself, William understood their struggles. His project included a scholarship program. After meeting Brenda, they formed a close bond, like father and daughter. Brenda told him about her friend, Marbella, from the orphanage, and soon he included Marbella in his program. In 2018, Marbella graduated from high school. She then enrolled at the Autonomous University of Baja California to pursue her dream of becoming a lawyer, with a focus on protecting children's rights. As she entered adulthood, William helped both Marbella and Brenda rent an apartment. Later, when she expressed her desire to live independently, and William once again supported her, acknowledging her maturity and sense of responsibility. During this time, she started university and also looked for a job to support herself. With William's help, she even purchased a car to commute easily between work, university, and home. Marbella started working at a gas station owned by Randy Chicas, a Mexican company that supports women. Her shift began at 5:30 a.m. and ended at noon. After lunch, she would head to the university to study law. Despite her packed schedule, but she made time for church services. It was at the gas station that she met Juan, who owned a cleaning company. One day, he stopped by to fill up the company car. He was immediately attracted by the friendliness and charm of Marbella. From then on, he made it a point to visit the station almost daily, filling up his cars and trying to strike up a conversation with Marbella. She treated him with the same courtesy and smile she gave to all her other customers. Soon, Juan started giving Marbella gifts, such as sweets, toys, and chocolate. He even brought breakfast for her and other female employees. She told William, who she thought of as her father, about Juan's actions. William warned Marbella to be careful since Juan was much older. However, she said she wasn't interested in Juan. For she, a 20-year-old girl, the attention of an older person like Juan seemed funny and even ridiculous. Her colleagues also found the situation funny. Everyone considered Juan to be a friendly and respectable person, not a threat to young girls. Marbella made it clear she wasn't interested in Juan and often turned down his invitations to meet. Juan didn't take these rejections well, and his behavior started to change. Marbella noticed that Juan would often follow her after her shift at the gas station. He seemed to always know her whereabouts and would appear, asking her to go with him. There were times when she suspected he of following her home. She mentioned this strange behavior to her colleagues. On Wednesday, February 5, 2020, Marbella failed to show up for work at the gas station and did not contact anyone to explain her absence. Marbella and her friend Brenda, although not living together, would meet up several times a week. Brenda had a young son whom Marbella adored and visited often. They would talk on the phone daily. Brenda, who worked the night shift, would usually call Marbella every morning after returning home. That Wednesday, Brenda and Marbella didn't talk as usual. Brenda woke up around 9 a.m. to find a message from Marbella saying she had a stomach ache and wouldn't be going to work. Instead, she planned to see a doctor. This message worried Brenda for two reasons: her health and the unusual manner in which the message was written. It was also strange that she didn't call. Brenda tried to reach Marbella but couldn't, so she contacted their mutual friends. However, none of them had any information about Marbella's whereabouts. The group of friends began searching for Marbella in local hospitals and medical centers, but they couldn't find her anywhere. Brenda and one of her friends decided to visit Marbella's house. They knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no answer. Normally, Marbella would leave a window slightly open for her friends to come and go. This time, the window was wide open. Brenda climbed in through the window and found the interior of the house looking as if Marbella had just come home from university. Her belongings, including books, clothes, bag, and car keys, were all in their usual places. However, Marbella is missing. Throughout the day, they searched various locations but found nothing. According to Brenda, they went to the police to report Marbella missing. However, because Marbella was an adult, police regulations required waiting 3 days before launching an official search. Despite this, an investigation began right away. Brenda and her friends started making flyers with Marbella's photo. Marbella was described as a young girl with brown eyes, long straight chestnut red hair, dark skin, a slim build, a height of 1.50 meters, and a weight of 45 kilograms. They posted and distributed these flyers throughout the city. At the same time, William used his network of contacts to launch a search campaign for Marbella. Along with Brenda, they even attempted to hack into Marbella's phone to determine her location, but this was unsuccessful. In a later interview, Brenda mentioned that even Juan's behavior became more suspicious. 3 days after Marbella's disappearance, on February 8, the police received a call from a man who reported finding a woman's body in a dump in the Colonia Te Colet area. This location was over 26 miles from Marbella's house in southern Tijuana and was so remote. It took the police a long time to locate this site, but they eventually arrived. Among a pile of garbage, they discovered a large black bag containing the body of a young woman. She was dressed in blue pajamas with images of black puppies and animal print slippers. The body was almost face down, with the legs tied with a yellow cord and the hands tied behind the back with a pink scarf wrapped. The body was taken to the morgue for examination, while investigators collected evidence at the scene. After finding the body, police informed Brenda that the body's characteristics matched the description of Marbella. Brenda and William immediately went to the morgue, but were told they had to wait until the next day to examine the body. Juan unexpectedly appeared and helped them gain access to the morgue. Unfortunately, they determined that the body was that of Marbella. At that time, Juan did not know that Brenda and Marbella's friends had reported him to the police, as they suspected him of stalking Marbella. The police requested permission from Marbella's family to carry out a forensic examination and conduct other investigations to collect evidence. The examination of Marbella's remains took about 5 days. Mourning began on February 13, 2020, and continued until February 14. Juan attended the wake and funeral, he wearing a T-shirt with her image. This made her friends extremely angry. Despite their anger, they remained silent, follow the instructions of the authorities so that he does not become suspicious, as they feared he might escape before sufficient evidence was collected for his arrest. At Marbella's funeral, Jose Ruiz, a close friend of hers, spotted an individual with scratches on his neck. This man behaved strangely, repeatedly approaching the coffin, threatening people with a knife, and offered to carry flowers to the cemetery in his car. Meanwhile, police are still trying their best to investigate Marbella's death. Forensic results revealed that she died from asphyxia due to severe compression of her neck, which blocked her air supply. She also suffered serious blows to the abdomen, causing damage to her internal organs. In front of the University of Baja California, Marbella's classmates held a memorial in her memory. They emphasized that she was a victim of violence by men, a serious problem taking place across Mexico. The investigation into Marbella's killing included interviews with people who knew her. Through the interviews, it was learned that a few days before she was killed, she had spoken to Juan. He said that he was a federal police officer in Baja California and worked as a specialist at the Attorney General's office. However, it was discovered that he had only interned at the Attorney General's office. Additionally, some media outlets reported that he had a criminal record and was imprisoned for offenses related to illegal substances in the state of Sonora. The results of a search of Marbella's car were even more troubling, as experts found a hidden geolocation device. Later, a search of Juan's house uncovered several similar devices and satellite detection receivers. This explains why he always knows where she is. However, the most compelling evidence came from a forensic examination of the body, which revealed fingerprints and semen. DNA analysis confirmed that these matched the genetic sample taken from Juan when he was brought in for questioning. An analysis of Marbella's mobile phone showed that her phone and Juan's were always in the same locations during her disappearance. This shows that he used her phone to send messages to her friends. A few days after the funeral, Juan was charged with the murder of Marbella, and on February 22, 2020, he appeared in court for the first time. During this hearing, it was revealed that after her disappearance, he contacted the state attorney general's office several times to ask about the investigation's progress. He also expressed his wish that the person responsible for Marbella's death would not be punished. The authorities stated that Juan had always been the main suspect in the case, due to previous reported incidents of harassment. It was said that he was obsessed with Marbella, even though he had known her for only 5 months. Since then, he had been under police surveillance. According to the investigation, he allegedly entered her house and kidnapped her. The incident occurred between February 5th and 8th in the Sai Kotlef Aliman neighborhood, where Juan lived. There he kept she, exerting physical and sexual violence, which caused injuries to her face, stomach, and genitals, ultimately leading to her death. The conclusion in the case was that Marbella died of lack of oxygen, caused by compression of the neck, which blocked the airway and blood vessels. She also sustained severe bruising to her abdomen, causing damage to internal organs. Juan's DNA matched semen found in Marbella's body, and a considerable amount of tissue was found under her fingernails, indicating a struggle. During the hearing, mobile phone tracking data revealed that Juan and Marbella's phones were together starting from the morning of February 5th. The body was discovered at Marbella's home. Another important clue is that their phones were also together on February 2nd. This was also the day Marbella reported her house and car keys missing. On February 27th, at a hearing in the Superior Court of Tijuana, Judge Daniel Aguilar Patina concluded there is enough evidence to accuse Juan of killing Marbella. The judge highlighted that Juan deliberately misled everyone about Marbella's whereabouts, pretending to be worried in front of her family and at the gas station, while he actually knew what was going on. He was temporarily detained in MIAs, but maintained his innocence regarding. His trial occurred from September 14 to 29, 2022. Over 2 years after the incident, forensic evidence and testimony from people close to Marbella were presented. It was discovered that on the morning Marbella went missing, a colleague had called her, noting that she had not been to the gas station. She only managed to say she was unwell before the connection was broken. Her friends described her as a wonderful person and identified Juan as a harasser. She never believed she was in danger, so she didn't file an official complaint against Juan, she thinking he would lose interest after her repeated rejections. Other witnesses mentioned that he often pretended to be a law enforcement officer, but he was just an intern at the University of Justice. After reviewing all the evidence and listening to the testimonies, Judge Marta Elvia Luna Vargas declared that Juan committed the horrendous crime, he that took Marbella's life. She then sentenced Juan to 42 years and 6 months in prison for the murder of Marbella Valdez. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Mariana Jocelyn Baltira. Mariana Jocelyn Baltira was born on October 24, 2000, in Morelos, a city in the state of Mexico. She was the eldest of 2 children. Her mother, Syra, had a difficult time giving birth to she, as she was born much earlier than expected. At birth, she has very low weight, causing doctors to be concerned about her chances of survival, and they expressed this to her parents. Mariana spent her first 2 months in a hospital's special ward for premature infants. Her mother prayed constantly for her recovery, and prayers were answered. Her condition improved rapidly, she gained weight, and by New Year's 2001, she was discharged home. So, the girl's parents celebrated the holiday with their daughter. While she grew up slim and beautiful, her health remained fragile from an early age. When Mariana was 4 years old, her family welcomed a second child, a baby boy named Bernardo. She adored her younger brother and helped her parents care for him from an early age. The 2 sisters were extremely close and almost inseparable. At the age of 6, Mariana was diagnosed with epilepsy, which required her to take regular medication to reduce the chances of seizures. Thanks to effective treatment and regular supervision from experts, her condition was well managed, allowing her to live a relatively normal life, much like other children her age. She pays great attention to health care, always follows a routine and takes medicine on time. Mariana draws very well and loved music. She was kind, sincere, and open-hearted. Everyone who knew her spoke highly of her. Despite this, she was very modest and shy, especially during her teenage years. She had only a few close friends, rarely went on dates, avoided parties, and hardly interacted with boys. She preferred spending time at home with her family. Petite and delicate, she looks much younger than her actual age. Although she is 16, she is often mistaken for being 13. Her care and love for animals is demonstrated by her regular care of homeless animals, feeding them, treating them, and finding them a safe home. While in high school, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian to provide professional care to animals in need. Mariana's parents often described her as too naive and trusting. This made them worry that someone would take advantage of her innocence and harm her. The neighborhood where her family lived was generally peaceful, and most of the residents know each other. However, their street was lined with many shops employing migrant workers, often unofficially. Some of these workers even lived inside the shops because they lacked housing. Of course, among these workers there are those with criminal records. However, the shop owner sees no problem with these workers, as long as they perform their duties responsibly. About 50 meters from Mariana's house is a butcher's shop where her parents often go to buy meat. The shop owner employed 4 workers, 2 locals who managed the sales and 2 outsiders who handled unloading, preparing the meat, and cleaning the shop. The outsiders lived in an attic on the shop's 2nd floor. As Mariana grew up, her parents occasionally asked her to do errands, such as buying meat at this butcher shop. There, she repeatedly encountered Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez, a handyman who lived on the 2nd floor. Just his appearance was enough to make her extremely scared. She often told her parents about this, describing his sinister gaze that made her blood run cold. However, he never approached or interacted with her, he only looked at her. Since there was no specific reason to accuse him, her parents decided it was best to not let her go to that store anymore. Instead, they began doing the shopping themselves. Then, one committed a minor theft, leading the store owner to fire him. From then on, no one heard from him for about a year. However, at the start of summer 2017, he showed up at the store again, asking his former employer for his job back. Surprisingly, he was rehired and moved back into the 2nd floor of the store. One day, Cyrus' niece was visiting their family. At that time, Mariana and her younger brother, Bernardo, were also at home because they have summer vacation. That morning, only Orlando, her father, had left the house around 9 a.m. Syra asked Mariana to go to the local supermarket to buy groceries for breakfast. Normally, she didn't let Mariana go out alone, but she thought her daughter was old enough to handle the task quickly and safely. It was bright outside, the streets were busy, and she believed nothing bad could possibly happen. Syra gave Mariana some money and asked her to buy milk, eggs, and vegetables. When little girl left the house, she wore an old t-shirt and pajama pants. The store was less than a few hundred meters away, so the trip to buy the groceries and return home in no more than 30 minutes. However, when an hour passed and little girl still hadn't returned, Syra became worried. She had left her phone at home, so Syra, holding her little niece in her arms, went out to search for her daughter. Syra walked to the store and asked the cashiers if they had seen Mariana, a young girl wearing glasses. They told Cyrus that the girl had been there, bought the groceries a couple of hours ago, and left. At that moment, Syra began to realize that something terrible had happened to her daughter. She hurried back home, asked Bernardo to watch over her niece, and went out again to continue the search. Syra began asking neighbors, street vendors, and passers-by if they had seen Mariana. However, the little girl seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Immediately after that, Syra immediately contacted the police and called her husband, Orlando. He took a break from work and rushed home to help search for Mariana. By the time the police arrived, dozens of neighbors, along with relatives and friends of the Baltira family, joined the search for Mariana. They distributed flyers with her picture. Initially, police asked the parents if their daughter might have gone on a date, met a friend, or visited someone. Her parents firmly denied these theories, insisting that she would never leave without informing them, especially since she had gone to the store in home clothes and carry a grocery bag. The area where Mariana disappeared had surveillance cameras, but almost none of them were functioning. Despite searching all day, no clues or traces of little girl were found. As night fell, the initial anxiety and panic turned into despair. The parents began to fear the worst, that their daughter would no longer live. On July 28, around 8 a.m., Mariana's parents received a call from a relative who lived nearby. The relative informed them that several police cars had arrived at the butcher's shop. Then, they quickly got ready and went to the scene. However, the police did not allow them inside, claiming that the situation had nothing to do with their daughter. Despite this, they were still resolutely not to leave. A few minutes later, after inspecting the premises, a police officer approached Mariana's father, Orlando, and informed him that the body of a young girl, matching the description of Mariana, had been found on the second floor of the building. The body was lifeless and severely mutilated. Orlando was asked to come inside for identification, but the officers strongly advised against it, warning that the scene was extremely gruesome. When Orlando entered and saw the body of his beloved daughter lying in a pool of blood, he felt like the whole world had collapsed. He was at a loss as to how to break the sad news to his wife, who was waiting outside. The cause of death was determined to be massive blood loss from a deep wound to the stomach. It was later discovered that the criminal had cut out the girl's stomach while she was still alive and left her to bleed to death. Experts concluded that Mariana died in the early hours of July 28, just hours before her body was discovered. This meant she had been alive for nearly 24 hours after her disappearance. During that time, the murderer continuously tortured the girl. Then he caused the wound that caused her death. The murder weapon was identified as a butcher knife, which was found on the floor near her body. The store owner discovered the horrific incident when he came to work in the morning. According to the butcher shop owner, every last Thursday of the month, the shop closes for cleaning. On this day, the owner focused on organizational tasks, held meetings with suppliers, and submitted reports to the tax inspectorate. Meanwhile, the employees disinfected and cleaned the premises. On Thursday morning, July 27, 2017, when the owner arrived at the store, he immediately noticed bloodstains on the floor. At first, he thought one of his employees who lived on the second floor might have been injured. However, upon going upstairs, he was stunned to see his employee's belongings covered in blood, as well as a knife and the body of a young girl in a pool of blood. Additionally, a significant amount of money was missing from the cash register, which the criminal had likely taken in fleeing the scene. Two employees who lived and worked at the store immediately became suspects. However, an hour later, one of them arrived at the store, just as shocked as everyone by what had happened. He said that the day before, he was busy, so he had to go back to his hometown, and the other employee agreed to cover his shift. The police determined his account to be truthful, as there was no evidence placing him at the crime scene. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. By that time, investigators had obtained CCTV footage from the supermarket where Mariana was shopping on the last day of her life. The footage showed little girl entering the store, followed a few minutes later by Juan Martinez, the butcher. His behavior was unsettling. He appeared to stalk her, like a predator tracking its prey. Without purchasing anything, he left the supermarket shortly after she. After that, both of them vanished. Although there were street cameras in the area, they were not functioning. Additionally, none of the many passers-by or street vendors reported seeing anything unusual. Mariana's parents were adamant that their daughter would never willingly leave with Juan, regardless of what he might have said or done to persuade her. They believe he must have forced the girl into the butcher shop. However, this raised a question: why hadn't little girl screamed or called for help? Once again, no witnesses noticed anything out of the ordinary. In 2015, Juan came under police scrutiny for harassment and causing serious bodily harm. He had started working as an assistant in a butcher's shop earlier that year. According to the shop owner, he was diligent and raised no concerns for a long time. However, in mid-2016, he was caught stealing money and was fired. After losing his job, he moved back to the suburbs to live with his parents. There, he lived with his old and weak mother, and his sister, who was her primary caregiver. Juan took advantage of his family, stealing money and belongings from the house. He abusing alcohol and illegal drugs. He frequently physically assaulted his mother and sister. Eventually, his sister, fed up with his abusive behavior, threatened to report him to the police. Because he was afraid of being arrested by the police, he decided to leave home. He went to his old employer, the owner of a butcher's shop, and asked to be rehired. The owner agreed, giving him both a job and allowed him to live on the second floor of the store. This happened in mid-June, about a month before a tragic incident unfolded. At first, Juan performed his work diligently. However, about a week later, he meets Mariana, who has changed and matured over the past year. While little girl avoided any interaction with him and never shopped at the butcher's shop, he began stalking her, following her through the streets and observing her daily routes. Another butcher, the who lives with Juan on the second floor, noticed his obsession with Mariana. Little did he know that Juan would soon commit a horrific crime. After Juan was identified as the sole suspect in the rape and murder of Mariana, all available resources were mobilized to find him. The police initially focused on his home, suspecting that his relatives might help him evade capture. However, his sister insisted that he was not welcome there and explained that he knew his family would immediately turn him in to the authorities. She showed no surprise over the horrific crime he had committed. In fact, she revealed that he had previously raped their elderly mother and even attacked her with a knife, threatening to cut her open like a pig if she didn't give him money for drugs. Finding Juan was a top priority for the police because he was highly aggressive, cruel, and a serious threat to others. The money he stole from the cash register could have lasted him a long time, but no one knew what he might do next. Will he reoffend after killing Mariana? For an entire month, the police searched the Morelos area and nearby suburbs, believing he couldn't have gone far. However, over time, they still could not find he. Information about Mariana's murder quickly spread nationwide through the media, causing police forces across the country to simultaneously hunt for the cruel murderer. Juan's photograph was broadcast daily on television, printed on the front pages of newspapers, and plastered on streets nationwide with the label "Ruthless Killer" at large. A substantial bounty was offered for any information about his location or help in capturing him, and the reward amount kept increasing. Yet, despite these efforts, the case made no progress. The search for Juan was very difficult. He had no contact with his family, no friends, no social media accounts, no mobile phone, and he didn't use credit cards. After 6 months of trying to locate him without any success, the reward for information about him was raised to about $250,000. Even so, there were no leads. Juan was finally captured in August 2019, 2 years after Mariana's murder. He was found nearly 1,000 kilometers away from the crime scene. In another state, thanks to an elderly woman who recognized him on the street. She noticed his suspicious behavior, as he constantly hid his face with a hood and sunglasses, and reported him to the police. She unaware that he was one of the most wanted criminals in Mexico. Juan was arrested right on the street, and to the surprise of the authorities, he did not resist. He calmly extended his hands, allowing officers to put handcuffs on him. The next day, after confirming his identity, the authorities transported him to Morelos, where the crime took place. He was placed in custody in a local prison while awaiting trial. In May 2022, 5 years after the tragic incident, the court sentenced Juan Cruz Quintero Martinez, who committed the murder and rape, to life in prison without parole. He must also pay approximately $49,000 in compensation for the damages he caused to Mariana's family. Mariana's parents and younger brother expressed that the arrest of her killer brought them great relief, as it ensured he could no longer harm other girls. However, they also acknowledged that no punishment, not even life imprisonment or restitution, could ease the pain in their hearts. Their beloved daughter and older sister was gone, and they would have to carry this sorrow for the rest of their lives. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Laura Conley. Laura Conley was born on March 15, 1978, in the United States as the third child of Carlene and James Conley. She grew up happily with her sisters, enjoying a loving and caring family environment. However, everything changed when Carlene and James divorced. At that time, Laura was a teenager and deeply affected by her parents' separation. Struggling with her emotions, she turned to alcohol for comfort, which eventually led to an addiction to psychotropic substances. Her mother believes Laura's addiction stems from the failure of their marriage. Carlene was born on June 13, 1945, in Virginia. Her 3 daughters were her top priority. Carlene blamed herself for the impact the divorce had on her youngest daughter, Laura. Carlene was always understanding and helpful to Laura, especially during difficult times. Family members and close friends often noted Laura's irritable behavior, while Carlene's other daughters married and became independent. Laura continued to live in the family home in Kentucky. She was unemployed and required constant care. Laura believed she was mentally ill and frequently sought medical help for her medications. However, there came a point when her health care providers stopped prescribing her these medications. Desperate to get her medications, Laura began breaking into neighbors' homes to steal any pills she could find. Laura often took advantage of her mother's kindness, constantly calling her at work and causing disruptions that forced Carlene to quit her job. In 2008, Laura was convicted of petty theft, but she was quickly released because her mother posted bail. Unfortunately, the situation got worse. Laura not only verbally abused her mother, but also physically abused her. Although Laura physically harmed Carlene on several occasions, Carlene still did not report her daughter or ask her to leave the house. When an incident occurred, Laura needed a mental health evaluation, but Carlene still welcomed her daughter back home, feeling obligated to take care of Laura. It is common for parents who have experienced violence from their children to hesitate in reporting the incidents. They often fear that doing so may harm their relationship with their child. However, this reluctance can endanger their own safety. Laura's violent behavior was not only directed at her mother, it also extended to her boyfriend, Chris Lewin. Laura faced legal consequences for her actions against him on 2 separate occasions. One notable incident occurred in late October 2014. Laura woke Chris while he was asleep and accused him of cheating, leading to an argument that turned physical. During the confrontation, Laura not only bit Chris but also used a kitchen knife to lightly cut his hand. As a result of the incident, Laura was given a light sentence in order to attend anger management therapy. However, court records indicate that there is no evidence that she continued to participate in the program. At age 35, Laura continued her behavior. On January 7, 2015, she was arrested again for biting her boyfriend's finger when he intervened to stop her from attacking Carlene. He could not understand why Laura was so deeply hostile towards her mother. Carlene had always been a caring, devoted mother to her 3 daughters and proud of her 5 grandchildren. She worked hard to support Laura and give her the help she needed to overcome her difficulties. Unfortunately, despite Carlene's unconditional love and good intentions, Laura began to abuse her mother over time. 5. Laura called 911 to report an incident at her home. She informed police that a home invasion had occurred, resulting in her mother being shot to death. Officers from the Independence, Taylor Mill, and Covington police departments quickly arrived at the scene. They witnessed a horrific scene, Laura covered in blood, and her mother, 69-year-old Carlene Conley, lying on the kitchen counter with multiple stab wounds and in critical condition. When police asked Laura what had happened, she claimed she did not remember because she had been unconscious. She mentioned that about 2 hours before the incident, several people had knocked on her door asking for candy, which was common on Halloween, even though the holiday was still far away. She provided police with a description of the suspect, which led to a search of the area. However, police were unable to find anyone matching Laura's description. To continue the investigation, police took Laura to the police station for questioning. After arriving at the police station, Laura provided additional details. She mentioned that she was being pursued for money owed to drug dealers. Additionally, Laura gave police inconsistent accounts of how she found her mother's body. Initially, she said that she found Carlene dead when she returned home. However, in the same conversation, she later said that after waking up in the basement, she went upstairs and found her mother dead on the kitchen floor. However, police Mike Richmond and Jim Moore quickly connected Laura to the crime within hours of starting their investigation. It became clear that she had lied to the police about what happened. The evidence showed that there had been no break-in, no fingerprints were found on the doors or windows to suggest that anyone else had been there. This led to the conclusion that Laura was the only person in the house when Carlene was murdered. Therefore, in the early morning of Sunday, March 15th, while Laura was celebrating her 37th birthday, the police arrested her for Carlene's murder. The next day, Monday, March 16th, Laura appeared before the judge via video link and stated that she pleaded not guilty. Police later booked her into the county jail without bail on charges of murder and domestic violence. She was also ordered not to contact her boyfriend. Prosecutor Rob Sanders said Carlene's murder would have a significant impact on the community, which is typically quiet and has a low crime rate. The medical examiner's report found that the attack on Carlene was severe, with an autopsy showing she had been stabbed 77 times. With 27 stab wounds and 2 bite wounds. On March 24th, Laura appeared in court and told the judge that she had no money, assets, or property, so she could not afford an attorney. The judge appointed a public defender for her and the hearing began. During the court proceedings, Officer Michael confirmed that Laura had opened the door to the police and that she was the only person in the house other than Carlene. He described finding Carlene on the kitchen floor, surrounded by several knives. He also noted that Laura was covered in blood, with her shirt, arms, legs, face, lips, and nose all covered in blood. After hearing the police testimony, the judge sent the case to the jury, who convicted Laura Conley of murder on April 16, 2015. Laura's trial began on January 3, 2017, nearly a year and 9 months after the crime. The jury heard testimony from about 30 witnesses. The prosecution presented evidence from police officers involved in the investigation and from Carlene's family. In contrast, the defense argued that Laura acted in self-defense due to severe emotional distress. The defense claimed that the knife attack was in response to an attack by her mother. When Laura took the stand, she explained to the jury that she and her mother had argued about her birthday celebration. During the argument, her mother hit her on the head with a heavy object. Laura testified that she could not remember anything that happened after that, including how she got injured or her 911 call. The jury learned that a physical examination of Laura after the crime revealed she had cuts on her head and back, bruises on her body, and a hematoma under her eye. On March 23, 2017, the parties presented their closing arguments. Assistant District Attorney Lawrence summarized the evidence and highlighted the many conflicting and unconfirmed accounts the Laura presented. Later that day, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Laura Conley guilty of first-degree murder and recommended a 27-year prison sentence. Laura's legal team filed for a retrial, claiming that her sentence was unfair. The lawyers argued that Laura was dealing with mental health issues, including bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. In their appeal, the defense emphasized that Laura had consumed large amounts of alcohol and a drug intended to cause drowsiness shortly before the incident. However, the judge rejected the appeal and ordered a psychological evaluation by court-appointed experts. The defense argued for the cancellation of the preliminary trial and requested a new trial, claiming that the initial trial was flawed, leading to Laura's guilty verdict. The prosecutor was allowed to use evidence from a prior assault committed by Laura. In June 2019, the Kent Supreme Court ruled that the trial court had made a mistake, which led to the overturning of Laura's 27-year prison sentence for her mother's murder and ordered a new trial. However, instead of going through a retrial, Laura opted to accept a plea agreement, which reduced her sentence to 20 years. As a result, she will be eligible for parole in 2032. Currently, Laura is incarcerated at the Women's Correctional Facility in Kent, where she is serving her sentence. Laura killed her own mother and displayed no remorse, leaving unresolved questions about her motives. Additionally, in just 10 years, Laura could be released. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Christopher Sutton. On Sunday, August 22, 2004, the Sutton family experienced a devastating tragedy following Susan's 57th birthday celebration. The celebration included Susan, her husband John, their son Christopher, his girlfriend Juliet, and family friend Teddy Montoda. After the party, Susan and John went to bed in separate rooms at their home in the upscale Coral Gables neighborhood near Miami, Florida. One night, a tragic event occurred. Susan usually slept in a separate room because her husband, John, snored loudly. While they were sleeping, a car stopped about 4 blocks away from their house. A man dressed in black was approaching their house with the intention of killing Susan and John. The attacker was armed with a 9mm Glock pistol and broke into Susan's house. He first went to John's bedroom and shot him twice in the head. He then moved to the room where Susan was sleeping, shot her 6 times, and left. The police were notified of the incident. Police and ambulances were dispatched to the scene shortly afterwards. Unfortunately, doctors determined that Susan, 57, had died. John was still alive but had suffered serious injuries and had lost a lot of blood. He was taken to hospital, where paramedics worked frantically to save him, although his chances of survival were slim. Before being taken to hospital, John said that he could not see the shooter in the dark and did not know who it was. Forensic experts began examining the crime scene, while police questioned neighbors and searched for surveillance cameras. Although no cameras were found, but neighbors reported seeing a suspicious man dressed in dark clothing running away from the house. There were no signs of forced entry. The killer had accessed the home through the sliding glass doors. The house was intact, with no money or jewelry taken, indicating to police that this was not a robbery. The attack was clearly targeted at killing Susan and John. But the motive behind the murder remains unknown. Melissa Sutton was 18 years old when her parents were attacked. As a freshman living on her own, she couldn't attend the celebration at their house. She was devastated to learn about her mother's death. Overwhelmed with grief, she went to see her father in the hospital. She described him as looking very unwell. John had miraculously survived 2 gunshot wounds to the head, leaving doctors astonished that he was still alive, although he remained in serious condition. When John woke up in intensive care, he realized he was blind. Additionally, he was experiencing severe shock. He felt unsafe in the hospital, constantly fearing that the killer might return. This left John feeling endangered. He was eager to leave the hospital and find a safe place to hide. His fears were taken seriously, so a guard was assigned to his room, and police patrolled the area around the clock. Due to the severity of his injuries, John was also unable to hear anything. He didn't hear the shots fired at his wife and was unaware of what happened to Susan. As he slowly started to recover, he asked Melissa how his wife was. She did not answer because the police had advised her not to say anything that might upset John further. He later found out that his wife had been murdered by her attacker. The news was a huge shock to him. Susan's death was a huge loss for the whole family. She had devoted her life to being a loving mother. Susan spent many years as an intensive care nurse, a respected profession in the United States. Her career ended in the late 1970s when she decided to stay at home with her husband, John, after the birth of their first child, Christopher. They made this choice because Susan had been unable to conceive for 7 years, at which point they decided to adopt a daughter, Melissa. The police discovered that John had built a successful business and may have had enemies. They also learned that he had received previous threats of violence. The police investigated everyone who had had animosity toward John and Susan, but they all had solid alibis. While the police searched the crime scene for evidence, they discovered that Susan's purse, jewelry belonging to her or her husband, were still intact. Although these items were visible, the police planned to interview John, but he had difficulty communicating. However, he was able to provide some useful information. Although he could not identify the shooter, he recalled seeing a dark figure at the door. The attacker may have been dressed all in black or may have been African American. John could not be certain in the darkness. Unfortunately, this information was not useful to the police. The police decided to speak with Teddy, a family friend who was at the party before the shooting. They visited his house for an interview. Teddy explained that he was on the phone with Susan at the exact moment the shooting happened. He heard a gunshot, followed by silence. Feeling frightened, he called the police, got into his car, and rushed to the Susan family's home, arriving just after the police. Teddy was very shaken by the attack on Susan. However, the police found his account unusual. They questioned why he was still talking to Susan when everyone else had already left the party, leading them to suspect an affair. Teddy clarified that he was not just a family friend but also a business partner. He claimed that they were discussing an urgent business matter and that he frequently communicated with both John and Susan to handle various issues, so he didn't find his late conversation with Susan abnormal. During the conversation, Teddy told the police that the shooters were professional and trained shooters. The police found this information interesting and took Teddy's gun for testing. Teddy was also called into the station for a lie detector test. The police believed he was hiding something and continued to question him. Teddy eventually confessed that he was in a romantic relationship with Susan. The police have often seen love triangles that can lead people to commit terrible acts. However, Teddy's gun did not match the weapon used in the attack, and his phone was tracked to a location far from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Teddy denied any involvement in the attack on John and Susan. Although his lie detector test was deemed inconclusive, it was suggested that his anxiety stemmed from trying to keep his affair with Susan a secret to avoid damaging his relationship with his friend John. John had a strong and trusting relationship with Teddy. Shortly before the incident, John and Teddy received one of the largest payouts in their law firm's history, over $1 million, and they celebrated this occasion extravagantly. Teddy was ruled out as a suspect, and the police decided to investigate other family members instead. An examination revealed that John could not have physically inflicted the shot on himself, so he was not considered a suspect. Their daughter Melissa has a solid alibi because she was in another city and also passed a lie detector test. The police then investigated Christopher Sutton. He had a girlfriend named Juliet. They had attended a family party together. Christopher quickly claimed that he and Juliet had gone to the movies the night before and provided their tickets as evidence. Juliet confirmed his story. The police then requested the cinema's surveillance camera footage, confirming that they had indeed gone to the cinema that night and confirming their alibi. After leaving the hospital, John moved in with Christopher so he could care for him for a while. However, disturbing evidence was discovered that Christopher actually wanted to kill his parents. He even threatened to kill his mother during a fight. Christopher became the prime suspect in the case. Additionally, Christopher had a criminal record that included vandalizing a teacher's home. When Christopher was 16, his parents, John and Susan, decided to send him to a reform school. Christopher was aggressive and had trouble controlling his anger, which made it difficult for him to socialize with other teenagers. He changed schools at least 6 times. He often skipped school. John would drop him off at the main entrance, walk to the door, but then Christopher would sneak out through another exit and go do his own thing. However, his absences were not his biggest problem. He also got involved in some criminal activities. One day, he and a group of friends broke into a teacher's house, causing damage and graffiti. As a result, Christopher was arrested and the teacher filed a lawsuit against him. The damage was estimated to be in excess of $50,000, and his parents had to pay it. Christopher's family had no financial problems and could easily pay the fine. However, his family was frustrated with their son's out-of-control behavior and did not know how to handle him. Christopher was a difficult teenager who had no respect for adult authority. His rebellion began with his love of piercings and tattoos, which his parents strongly disapproved of. Despite their efforts, they were unable to change his behavior, which led to more problems. One day, Christopher pointed an unloaded rifle at his mother and sister, threatening to kill them. Shortly before Christopher's 16th birthday, Susan discovered a note in his room that outlined a plan to kill his parents to inherit their money. Susan informed John about the note, and they confronted Christopher, who dismissed it as a joke. However, when his parents saw the note, they became frightened. From that point on, they were afraid to be alone with their son in the house. They even sought legal help, which led to a court-ordered rehabilitation program. Staff from a specialist organization forcibly transferred Christopher to a rehabilitation facility on the island of Samoa called Paradise Bay. It is a strict school for troubled youth. In 1998, when Christopher first arrived at this institution, his behavior became extremely aggressive, leading to him being restrained. Following this, he was taken to a remote camp in the mountains, where he was left tied up. The staff aimed to re-educate him through these strict measures. Typically, such severe discipline was effective and helped even the most challenging cases to improve. After spending a year in a behavior correction facility, Christopher sent his parents an emotional video message. In it, he described the violence he experienced there and accused his parents of not loving him for sending him to such a place. Upon hearing this, his parents visited institutions for troubled teenagers in Samoa but found nothing wrong. As a result, they did not believe Christopher's claims. They knew about the strict rules in place and believed they were intended to benefit troubled teens. Furthermore, Christopher was there under a court order, so his parents could not take him away. However, Christopher still hoped to leave the facility when he turned 18. John then received a court order stating that Christopher would remain in custody. The program at Paradise Bay was extended for another year, which surprised Christopher. But he had no choice but to remain at the facility. In 2000, Paradise Bay was closed after management faced multiple allegations of youth mistreatment. Christopher finally returned home on his 19th birthday, after 30 months at Paradise Bay. This situation raised concerns for the police, as his anger at being mistreated could be considered a motive for murder. After enduring such torture, Christopher may have felt the urge to take revenge on his parents. However, after returning from Paradise Bay, he changed. Christopher always showed that he had become a caring and calm son, especially in how he took care of his father following an incident. John could not believe that his son could be involved in the case, believing that Christopher had changed. However, the police suspected that Christopher had orchestrated the double murder, which was only partially successful because his father survived. Although Christopher had an alibi, he may have hired someone else to carry out the crime. The police needed to gather evidence to support their suspicions. So they brought him in for a second interview. In this conversation, Christopher reveals details that have not been revealed to the public and remain confidential. Christopher said he went to the scene of the incident. He saw the shooter walking down the hallway, and his mother Susan had been shot 6 times, information that was later confirmed during the investigation. Christopher also recounted the order in which the shots were fired and other key details. While Christopher appears distraught and cries over his mother's death, the police believe he is lying and is actually a criminal. However, Christopher was supported by his girlfriend Juliet, who also seemed shocked by the incident. She said she herself had been in shock for a long time, following the news of the shooting. Juliet met Christopher when she was 17, and he was 19, having just returned from a school for troubled youth. She described him as kind, polite and courteous, and he made a strong positive impression on her. He treated her like a true gentleman. So she could never imagine that he could commit murder. Juliet said that his parents welcomed her into their family. His mother, Susan, taught her how to apply makeup and helped her develop her dressing style. His father, John, also supported her by giving her a job at his law firm. The couple's parents supported them financially without expecting anything in return. They were happy to see the couple together. When police first encountered Christopher at the crime scene, it was shortly after he had been informed of the incident. He appeared to be very upset, and one officer noticed tears on his face. However, his initial statement to police during questioning shattered the impression of sadness. He quickly explained that he and Juliet had had dinner with their parents but left at around 9 p.m. to go to the movies. He then gave the police their movie tickets. Instead of asking how his parents were doing, he focused on justifying his actions and emphasized his alibi before any charges were brought. Police carefully reviewed surveillance footage from the cinema, which showed Christopher leaving after the movie around midnight. They noticed he immediately used his mobile phone to make a call, arousing curiosity about who he was contacting. The police quickly checked all his calls. Police later determined that Christopher had contacted a man named Garrett Kopp 331 times in the days leading up to the murder, which raised suspicions. Garrett, a police officer with a criminal record, had come to the attention of police. They suspected he might be involved in the crime. The case drew attention to Garrett's troubled past, including multiple arrests, adding to police suspicions. Police began to consider Garrett as a potential suspect. At the time of the case, he was out on bail. When police examined the weapon used in the murder, they found it to be very similar to Garrett's Glock, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Garrett had a tense conversation with the police and later admitted to attacking John and Susan. However, Garrett insisted that he did not act on his own. He said that Christopher had threatened to kill him and his son if he did not comply. Garrett insisted that the idea for the attack was entirely Christopher's. He also said that Christopher had given him the gun and had left the door unlocked, allowing him easy access to the house. The police arrested Garrett and charged him with murder, but his testimony was not enough to keep Christopher in custody. Juliet was questioned by police who believed she had more information than she was revealing. Despite their efforts, she denied any involvement and insisted on her innocence for several hours. The interrogation lasted 13 hours in total, but the police did not record it. Later, Juliet alleged that police had threatened her with arrest to force a confession and acted provocatively during the questioning. However, she eventually admitted that Christopher felt a strong resentment towards his parents for placing him in a facility for troubled teenagers. Recently, his parents tried to push him to get a job and start covering his own costs, which he found unacceptable, and this led to family conflicts. During questioning, Juliet revealed that Christopher had been planning revenge on his parents for years. He often spoke about the inheritance and how they could live without worries if he could take everything his parents had earned. However, she didn't take his threats seriously. The police had gathered enough evidence to obtain an arrest warrant for Christopher Sutton. However, by that time, he had disappeared. This was a crucial moment for the police, as they feared that Christopher might return to harm John. Fortunately, the police were able to locate and arrest Christopher, charging him with the murder of his mother and attempted murder of his father. Garrett Kopp and Christopher Sutton were eventually tried separately, and both faced the death penalty. Christopher, however, maintained that he had no role in planning the crime. The defense argued that the police were unfair, claiming that the police pressured Juliet, which influenced her testimony. After Garrett learned that he could face the death penalty, Garrett decided to cooperate with the prosecution by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, which was in his favor. He was then sentenced to 30 years in prison. The prosecution's case took a turn when Juliet appeared in court to testify. She revealed that Christopher had often expressed anger at his parents for not giving him money, even saying that they deserved to die for their actions. The defense argued that much of Juliet's testimony was given under police pressure and should be excluded from the case. However, the judge denied this request. In court, Juliet maintained that she had been truthful during her interrogation with the police. She stated that she viewed Christopher's anger as mere frustration and never believed he would go on to commit such serious crimes. After Juliet's testimony, John, the surviving father, shared his thoughts. After hearing all the witness testimony, John believed that Christopher was capable of committing the crime. John noted that even after leaving the hospital, Christopher continued to try to manage the family's finances, which led him to believe that Christopher was involved in the crime. When it was Christopher's turn to speak, he accused Garrett of attacking their parents due to his drug addiction. Christopher highlighted several moments when Garrett was out of control due to drugs, claiming that during those times he was dangerous and capable of committing any crime. Christopher also mentioned that he kept drugs in Susan's bedroom closet. The Garrett might have entered the house to steal illegal drugs. However, the prosecutor argued that the scene did not appear to be a burglary, everything was intact, even the money and jewelry were intact. If it was a burglary, Garrett would have taken valuables. In his defense, Christopher claimed that he had changed and overcome the anger, resentment, and disappointment he felt towards his parents for sending him to a special school. He believed that he had changed for the better. After extensive deliberation, the jury found Christopher Sutton guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. Christopher was shocked by the verdict because he was sure that he would be acquitted. Christopher received 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Currently, survivor John Sutton is putting in great effort to regain his eyesight. He has formed a new relationship and started a family, and at 70 years old, he continues to practice law. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Sidney Powell. Brenda Powell was born in 1969 in Saline, Agua, USA. She graduated from high school and then attended Akron University. After completing her studies, she began working as a pediatrician in the oncology department of her local children's hospital. For over 28 years, she has dedicated herself to helping sick children. Brenda oversees inpatient care and is known to her peers and hospital staff as a calm, quiet person who is exceptionally kind to both patients and their parents. In November 1996, Brenda, 27, married Stephen Powell and took his last name. They were introduced through a mutual friend who worked with her at the hospital. The couple enjoyed a happy life together for 23 years and welcomed 2 children. A daughter named Sydney and a son named Andrew. Since childhood, Sydney has been passionate about sports, especially football. Her family watched football together every Sunday, which helped strengthen their relationship. They also regularly visited the beach and Disneyland. As Sydney grew older, she and her mother, Brenda, began to spend more time together. While her father and brother watched football, they enjoyed shopping, which further strengthened their relationship. Sydney did well in high school, which helped her pass her exams and gain admission to Mount Union University, where she also received a scholarship. In college, she became friends with Lauren and a group of female students while living on campus. She participated in school events and was introduced to many different activities. Friends described Sydney as friendly and easygoing. Sydney's academic journey took an unexpected turn after her first year. Initially, everything seemed fine. She excelled in her classes and was praised by her teachers, ranking among the top students. Sydney began working part-time during the summer holidays to earn extra money. However, during her second year, Sydney faced significant challenges and decided to move off campus. Her friends were initially confused by this sudden decision but later learned that Sydney was struggling academically. Her grades were dropping. Additionally, Sydney began sleeping excessively, often around 16 hours a day. Sydney's friends thought she could handle it all because she was a smart and hardworking student who had previously done well in school. Unfortunately, Sydney struggled and ended up failing 3 out of 4 exams. Due to strict regulations, she received a notice of expulsion from the university, which shocked everyone. Sydney was worried and shared her concerns with her friends. Fortunately, they informed her that she could reapply for admission. At the beginning of 2020, Sydney resumed her studies, attending classes and sorority meetings. She happily told her friends that she had been readmitted to the university and was doing well. In early February, Sydney was notified that she had to leave the school permanently and that her expulsion would remain in effect. She was offered assistance with moving and packing. And the school planned to notify her parents of her situation to help cover her expenses. However, Sydney told the school administration that her family already knew and did not need to be contacted. This was not true, and she was afraid that her parents would find out about her expulsion. During this time, she told her parents that she was doing well in school and had good grades, and that she had even won a scholarship. Her parents trusted her and had no reason to doubt her. After being evicted from campus, Sydney left but did not return home before the end of February. Instead, she stayed with friends in various hotels, paying in cash to avoid being tracked and to keep her situation at the university a secret. Although she worked part-time to support herself, her earnings were insufficient. Sydney constantly searched for online opportunities to make money but could not find a full-time job that would provide adequate support. She continued to live in hotels or with friends, afraid to go home. She cut back on everything and often did not eat enough. Eventually, she decided to return home, claiming that the campus was closed for renovations. She told her parents that she would stay with them while she went to college and still work. Her parents believed her and thought everything was fine. Sydney has been lying to her mother by saying that she is fine. Recently, Brenda has noticed some strange changes in her daughter's behavior. She discovers that Sydney is spending more time at home and not going to school, which raises concerns. This information later comes to light because Sydney's entire family uses the Life 360 app, a mobile phone location tracking app on a map for safety, allowing family members to know where each other are. On February 25, 2020, Brenda received a notification from the app that Sydney had stayed home all day instead of coming to college as scheduled. This worried Brenda, who was concerned that something was wrong. She contacted her daughter to find out what was going on. Sydney replied that she had a week off because her teacher was absent. She mentioned that students were given assignments to complete at home and were participating in remote learning. However, Brenda began to doubt Sydney's story. She told her daughter that her explanations did not seem right and reminded her of the importance of good grades to maintain her scholarship and graduate, which would affect her future job opportunities. She also emphasized the importance of attending school regularly. Sydney then reassured her mother that everything was fine and that she should not worry. The deception continued. On March 2nd, Sydney texted her mother, saying she was going to school and would be back by 2:30 p.m. Instead, she spent time with a friend, watching TV, while lying about her college situation. During this time, the parents noticed that something was wrong. Their daughter did not receive the scholarship, so her father, Stephen, had to pay her tuition. He tried to send money through the payment gateway, but could not complete the transaction because he had lost access to his account. Initially, he suspected a technical problem and decided to wait. However, when Stephen logged in on March 3rd while working at a metallurgical plant, he was still unable to complete the transaction. He then asked his daughter about the problem. Sydney reassured him not to worry and promised that she would look into the matter and resolve it. Stephen realized he could not delay any longer as the deadline was near, and he needed to pay for his daughter's studies quickly. He decided to contact the university himself to resolve the situation. When he called, the staff checked their records and informed him that Sydney was not listed as a student, meaning her access had been revoked. Stephen was shocked and thought there must be some mistake. He requested they verify the information again, and they confirmed that Sydney had indeed been expelled. However, the university staff would not disclose the date of her expulsion, citing confidentiality rules. Stephen used a tracking app to locate Sydney, who was supposed to be in class. Instead, he discovered she was at home while he was at work. He wanted to go home to talk to her, but he feared she might track his movements and run away. To avoid this, he left his phone at work and headed home. Before leaving, he called Sydney to gather information, but she avoided giving clear answers. During the conversation, she admitted that she was struggling at university and didn't like it there. However, she continued to lie, not confessing that she had been expelled a long time ago. Instead, she claimed she had just not been attending classes. Stephen was troubled by his daughter's situation. He believed she was capable and had a bright future ahead, but he worried that her lack of commitment to attending classes could hinder her progress. He wanted to talk to her about the issue so they could find a solution together. On his way to work, Stephen called Brenda to inform her about their daughter's learning difficulties. Although Brenda suspected something was wrong, she hoped it was not true. Throughout the call, Stephen was concerned about Sydney's situation. However, Brenda reassured him. With a background in psychology, she had a skill for helping others and wanted to use her experience to support their daughter. She promised Stephen that she would take time off work, go home, and have a calm and open discussion with Sydney to ensure that they could all make the best decision together. Brenda then tried to contact the school but was unsuccessful. She left a voicemail asking for a call back and then went home. When Brenda reached her private entrance, she told her husband what had happened and went inside. Meanwhile, teachers Michelle and John received Brenda's message and called her back within the hour. At approximately 12:36 p.m., Brenda answered the phone and spoke calmly to the teachers. Everything seemed normal until Brenda started screaming into the phone, followed by a series of noises. Michelle and John, who were listening on speakerphone, were confused about what was happening but sensed that something was wrong. Michelle and John were worried about what had happened and tried calling Brenda again, but she did not answer. After several tries, a woman finally picked up at 12:40 p.m., but it wasn't Brenda. The teachers recognized Sydney's voice and asked to speak to her mother, but the call suddenly ended. This situation made Michelle and John suspicious. They decided to contact the local police to check on Brenda. Police officer Kenneth Diss, a friend of Brenda's family, heard the call and was extremely concerned about the alarming situation. He personally called Stephen to ask what was going on at their house, but Stephen could not provide any information because he was not home. After thinking for a moment, Stephen recalled that Sydney and Brenda were supposed to be at home discussing their study problems. He suspected there might have been a conflict between his wife and daughter. But he couldn't imagine the reality of the situation. Stephen then rushed home and called his daughter, Sydney, to find out what was going on. Sydney reassures him that everything is fine and the atmosphere seems calm. However, when Stephen tells her that the police are on their way, Sydney suddenly becomes hysterical. She begins to cry and reveals that a robber has broken into the house and attacked them. The call then ends abruptly. The police had already arrived at the house when Sydney dashed out, covered in blood, and screaming. She told the officers a shocking story about a robber who had broken in and attacked her mother. She said she heard glass breaking and that her mother told her to run, so she did. Sydney then hid in a courtyard, anxiously listening. She then found her mother lying in a pool of blood and she tried to help her, which is how she got blood on her. Inside the house, officers found Brenda lying face up in a room. She was badly injured, with a bloody cast iron skillet nearby and a kitchen knife on the floor. Despite the broken glass, officers began to doubt Sydney's story. Her story about a robber seemed very unbelievable. An ambulance arrived quickly and took Brenda to hospital, where she was taken to the intensive care unit. Sadly, 50-year-old Brenda Powell died shortly after arriving. Sydney was also examined by paramedics, but no serious injuries were found. She was sedated, her cuts were bandaged, and she was sent home. Forensic experts who examined Brenda's body were shocked by the brutality of the attack. She had suffered a severe blow to the back of the head, which caused her scalp to detach from her skull. Additionally, she had numerous stab wounds, estimated to be between 20 and 30, mostly concentrated on her neck. There were also multiple bruises and cuts on her arms, suggesting she had tried to defend herself. A preliminary review of the situation led police to believe that Sydney's account of events was fabricated. Although Sydney was covered in blood and had several smaller cuts on her arms, they were significantly less severe than her mother's injuries. It was evident that the robbery had been staged, as nothing was taken from the house. Sydney's actions raised several questions. After her mother told her to leave the house, Why didn't she run to the neighbors for help or call 911? Instead, she waited in the yard and later went back into the house without any apparent fear. None of the neighbors reported seeing a robber. The blood found on Sydney was tested and matched her mother's, including traces on the broken glass. Police sent the knife, believed to be the murder weapon, and the frying pan for analysis. Brenda's blood was found on these items, and no fingerprints or other DNA were found at the scene. It appears that Sydney injured herself when she stabbed her mother. Sydney Powell was then taken to the police station for questioning. After the initial panic subsided, she refused to answer any questions. By this time, police investigating the attack had learned about recent events in Sydney's university life. They discovered that she had been expelled a month earlier and had lied to her family about her situation, staying with friends in hotels instead. She was so afraid of disappointing those around her that she had lied not only to her parents but also to her classmates and others. Police believe that Sydney was so afraid of telling the truth that she decided to kill her mother when her mother started to suspect something was wrong. Despite this, Sydney chose to remain silent. 19-year-old Sydney Powell was arrested and charged with murdering Brenda. She also faced charges for causing serious injury and for tampering with evidence to mislead the investigation. Due to her mental health issues, she was unable to admit or deny her guilt. Her lawyer argued that she was insane, stating that Sydney had struggled with serious mental health problems since childhood. At the time of the offense, Sydney may have been experiencing a mental health crisis that affected her perception of her actions. Sydney faced several mental health issues that may have contributed to the violent incident, which led police to request a psychiatric evaluation. During the examination, Sydney spoke about her memories of that day but could only recall bits and pieces. She remembered sitting in the basement, anxious about her parents coming home after her father found out about her struggles. She also remembers her mother coming home and their conversation starting, when her mother comforted her and asked what happened at school. She wished her mother would leave her alone. Then she heard the sound of glass breaking, and then she couldn't remember anything else about what happened. Sydney informed her doctor that she had been experiencing hallucinations since she was 11 years old. She had always been very anxious, responsible, and self-critical, setting extremely high academic standards for herself. At times her anxiety became so intense that it affected her ability to concentrate on tests, leading to multiple psychological evaluations. After extensive evaluation and discussion with Sydney, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with acute post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, and depression. Sydney reported that she had recurring nightmares of her mother covered in blood. The lack of a clear motive for the murder led the psychiatrist to determine that Sydney was insane at the time of the incident. Another doctor who worked with Sydney for at least 3 to 6 months before the crime noted that her mental health had deteriorated significantly. She started losing touch with reality and began failing her exams, which ultimately led to her expulsion from university. Her condition was worsened by extreme self-criticism. She couldn't accept that she had failed. Sydney was also afraid to confess her struggles to her parents. However, the truth eventually came out, causing her immense stress. This culminated in a psychotic breakdown that resulted in her mother's murder. After her arrest, Sydney's bail was initially set at $250,000 but was later raised to $500,000. One of her relatives posted bail, allowing her to await her trial outside of custody. During this time, she received treatment for her mental health issues and felt significantly better by the time the hearings began. Sydney eventually regained her composure. After Sydney saw Brenda talking to college teachers, she knew that her mother would soon hear the truth from them. In a psychotic state, she attacked her mother. Teachers at the college heard the beginning of the attack. During the trial, her friends and relatives confirmed that they did not notice any significant changes in her behavior leading up to the crime. Although she was upset about being expelled, she was generally cheerful and sociable. The only noticeable difference was that she began sleeping more. The defense acknowledged that Sydney killed her mother but maintained that she was insane at the time. However, many experts disagreed with the psychiatrist's diagnosis. What everyone agreed on was that she suffered from borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by stubbornness, mood swings, and self-destructive behavior. In addition, signs of hallucinations were reported by Sydney to a psychiatrist when she was 11. There was no evidence in the medical records to support Sydney's claims, which undermined the defense's strategy. Several former friends mentioned that Sydney had exhibited unusual behavior even during her school years. One teacher recalled when Sydney was so nervous that she couldn't read anything on a test. However, teacher didn't realize that Sydney's anxiety could indicate mental health issues, so teacher didn't tell anyone. This type of anxiety continued into college, which may have contributed to Sydney failing her exams and eventually being expelled. While awaiting trial, Sydney lived with her grandmother and was prescribed medication to treat her mental health issues. The medication list and dosage were changed several times to find the most effective combination. Sydney's health improved significantly, and she shared any positive changes with her doctor. Her father also noticed the improvement and admitted that Sydney had a strong bond with her mother and loved her deeply. He believed that if Sydney had been in a healthy state of mind, she would never have harmed her mother. Throughout the trial, Sydney cried continuously and she expressed remorse for her actions. On September 18, 2023, the jury deliberated. Sydney Powell was found guilty on all counts. Sydney was sentenced to life in prison but will be eligible for parole after 15 years. Sydney and her attorney were unhappy with the sentence and planned to appeal the court's decision.